Chapter 37-34. Unfortunately, before Lin Yi officially agreed to sell the carcass of the nine-tailed cloud leopard, he could do whatever he wanted with it. No one else had the right to intervene. Therefore, even if the middle-aged bearded man was full of anger, he could only vent his anger on the Jinx king of Junk. Seeing that Lin Yi seemed to believe his words, the king of Junk suddenly became spirited. He nodded repeatedly without caring about other people's expressions. It's definitely a good material that can only be found by chance. If it can be used to cast weapons, its value will definitely be far more than 200 spiritual jades. Thank you for your advice. Lin Yi pondered for a moment, then turned to the middle-aged bearded man and said, I'm sorry, I plan to keep the front paw and the tail for my own use, and sell the rest as a whole. Do you still want to buy it? Of course, the price can be lower. Don't forget, Lin Yi was also a blacksmith, just like the king of Junk in front of him. It was just that he didn't have a master, no information, and no crafting scroll, so he couldn't try. Now, after hearing the king of Junk's reminder, he suddenly had an idea. Instead of selling the front paw and the tail, he might as well keep them for his own use. He couldn't find a blacksmith in the secular world before, but this was the Heaven Stage Island. As long as he was willing, it wasn't difficult to find information about blacksmithing, and he might even have the chance to become a real blacksmith in the future. The king of Junk in front of him, who claimed to be a blacksmith master, was the proof. Hearing Lin Yi's suggestion, the middle-aged bearded man frowned, but then he patted his chest and said with a forthright expression, Anyway, I'm buying the carcass of the nine-tailed cloud leopard to make a signboard, not to sell it. You can keep the front paw and the tail if you want, as long as the rest can be used as a signboard. But as for the spiritual jades, I'll still give you 200 spiritual jades. Just treat it as making a friend. I, Chen Heihu, won't be so stingy over such a small amount of spiritual jades. Chen Heihu? Lin Yi was a little surprised. My surname is Chen. Heihu is the nickname given to me by the people in the market. How about it? It fits my image, doesn't it? How should I address you, brother? Chen Heihu laughed and deliberately stroked his thick beard. Hee. Thank you very much. My name is Lin Er. Lin Yi nodded and casually came up with an alias that he had never used before. Chen Heihu nodded and immediately ordered a servant beside him to cut off the front claws and tail of the cloud-piercing leopard. At the same time, he picked out 200 pieces of good jade full of spiritual energy and handed them to Lin Yi. Brother Chen Heihu, since my cloud leopard's body isn't complete, it's not a very good one. You're very generous, giving me 200 spirit jades, but I can't just accept it like that. Lin Yi waved his hand. I saw it in your friend's backpack, but I can't accept it just like that. There are also some spiritual jades of poor quality. Why don't you give me those spiritual jades? Chen Heihu stared blankly. He didn't expect Lin Yi to not be a greedy person. He did have some spirit jades of poor quality. You can't pick your customers when you're doing business, right? You have to take whatever people give you. Of course. Those spiritual jades were usually given in threes. If it was just one, he wouldn't do it. Chen Heihu thought for a moment and said, There's no need for that. Those spiritual jades aren't of good quality and aren't full of spiritual energy. Since we're brothers, I naturally can't cheat you. Although this exchange would save him a lot of money. He could save a lot of money, but he was a straightforward person, so he didn't care about that. That's right, that's why I'm doing this. Lin Yi said resolutely, otherwise, I won't be able to do business with you next time. Seeing Lin Yi's determination, Chen Heihu could only nod and say, Then I'll take advantage of you this time. Brother Lin, if you hunt any spirit beasts in the future, you must take care of me. Don't worry. The price will definitely satisfy you. The reason why he was so straightforward before, apart from needing the nine-tailed cloud-piercing leopard, was because he wanted to make friends with Lin Yi. Of course, now he felt that not only was Lin Yi's strength superb, but his character was also very good. Because Lin Yi didn't intentionally hide his strength, Chen Heihu could clearly feel that Lin Yi was only an expert in the early stage of the foundational realm. He wasn't considered strong on Heaven Stage Island where foundational realm experts were everywhere. However, the more it was like this, the more precious Lin Yi was. It wasn't rare for an expert in the middle stage of the foundational realm to be able to hunt a nine-tailed cloud-piercing leopard. However, for an expert in the early stage of the foundational realm, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Those who could do this were all geniuses among men. As a shrewd and experienced businessman, Chen Heihu had his own way of looking at people. He knew who had a bright future and needed to befriend as much as possible, and who didn't have a bright future to look at. In his eyes, Lin Yi was naturally the former, while the tattered king was the latter. Of course. Lin Yi nodded. In the future, he would have to deal with all kinds of powerful spiritual beasts. If he hunted and killed any spiritual beasts, he could sell them to Chen Heihu to save himself some trouble. After chatting with Chen Heihu for a while, Lin Yi saw that the sky was getting brighter. It was almost time for the back street to open. Lin Yi immediately said goodbye and left. However, after a few steps, he suddenly felt that someone was following him. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that someone was greedy for money? Although 200 spiritual jade was not a lot, it was enough for some people to take the risk. Under the cover of the gradually increasing crowd, Lin Yi turned around and observed for a while. Then he found that the person following him was the tattered king. Lin Yi was puzzled. Why was this guy following him? Did he really want to kill him? But it didn't look like it. Judging by the strength of this guy, he was definitely not strong among the experts in the early stage of the foundational realm. He shouldn't be so daring as to target him, right? Seeing that Lin Yi had noticed him, the tattered king quickly walked up to him. After a moment of hesitation, he plucked up his courage and asked, "Brother Lin, what do you plan to do with the front claws and tail of the nine-tailed cloud-piercing leopard?" Ha! Lin Yi was even more puzzled. "I can use my own things however I want. Why should I tell an outsider I don't know?" Chapter 37-35. Lin Yi nodded. It was easy to understand. In theory, being a blacksmith was even more expensive than being an alchemist. It was normal for an inner disciple of Blue Cloud Pavilion like the worn-out king to be unable to cook without rice. Pausing for a moment, the tattered king took a deep breath and stared at Lin Yi with a burning gaze. The front claws and tail of the cloud nine-tailed leopard are both rare materials that can only be found by luck. If second brother Lin trusts me, you can come to Clear Cloud Pavilion anytime. I'm willing to forge weapons for you for free. I see. Only then did Lin Yi figure out the worn-out king's intention. He did not reply immediately. Instead, he asked, "May I know where your master is? Is there a place in the 3 pavilions that specializes in training blacksmiths?" The worn-out king was stunned for a moment. He replied, "No, blacksmiths are a very unpopular profession. As far as I know, there aren't many serious blacksmiths in the North Island, but there are quite a few in the Middle Island. As for my master, I learned from a blacksmith master named Sun Sikong by chance for a few days. The rest is what I learned from the materials. Don't worry, I can't boast about anything else, but I'm definitely good at forging weapons." Can't boast about anything? Lin Yi could not help but laugh. But Chen Heihu and the others just said that you've never succeeded in forging weapons? Ah! The worn-out king choked. No matter how much he thought of himself as a blacksmith genius, it was a bloody fact. That was why people called him the worn-out king. "I believe you'll succeed. If there's a chance in the future, I'll come to Blue Cloud Pavilion to look for you." Lin Yi smiled at him. He had a good impression of the worn-out king. He could tell that the worn-out king was a guy with real skills. However, even if he only had the worst materials, he still insisted on forging top-notch weapons. It would be a miracle if he could succeed in forging weapons with such a weird philosophy. In any case, the front claws and tail of the cloud nine-tailed leopard were useless in his hands. If he had the time in the future, he might as well look for this fellow and study it together. Perhaps they could really forge something decent. "Are you really willing to believe me?" The king of Jianghu was overjoyed. Originally, he didn't have any expectations for this matter. He just didn't want these good casting materials to be wasted, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to agree. One had to know that although the profession of being a blacksmith had always been sought after, there were only a handful of people who could truly live up to this title. For a blacksmith like the king of Jianghu who had never forged a decent weapon, he was a complete joke in the eyes of others. No one would take his words seriously. It was even more impossible for them to hand over their rare materials to him, not even if the king of Jianghu volunteered to forge for free. Because once these materials were used to forge, there would only be 2 results. Either they succeeded and became a part of the divine weapon, or they failed. From then on, it became a pile of trash and no longer had any value. With the king of Jianghu's embarrassing history, how could he succeed? Only a ghost would believe him. Oh, even a ghost would not believe him. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that out of 10,000 people, 9,999 people would not believe in the King of Junk's ability. However, he was lucky today. He met the last person who was willing to believe in him. To him, this was probably the last straw to clutch at. If he couldn't seize this opportunity to clear his name, he might have to spend the rest of his life with this embarrassing title of King of Rags. Seeing that Lin Yi nodded affirmatively, the King of Junk was so excited that he couldn't speak coherently. Then, thank you so much. Brother Lin, don't worry. I'll definitely forge something good for you. I won't waste these great materials. Whenever you're free, come find me at the Blue Cloud Pavilion. I'll be waiting for you. All right, I've got some urgent matters to attend to at the moment. I'll be counting on you when the time comes. Lin Yi responded. Although he believed that the King of Junk had the ability to forge weapons. After all, the guy's embarrassing 0 success rate was right in front of him. He had to be careful. If he handed the materials to the King of Junk hastily, it might really go to waste. Therefore, even though he had promised the King of Junk to help him forge weapons, Lin Yi decided to follow him throughout the process. He could also observe and learn how to forge weapons. No matter what, the King of Junk was a proper blacksmith. His attainments in the aspect of blacksmithing were much more profound than that of a layman like Zhang Tai, who had to fumble around by himself. After all, although Lin Yi had repaired the godly pesticide cauldron, expanded the space of the jade pendant, made the essence necklace, and forged the heaven-level heavenly weapon by himself, these could not be considered as real forging weapons. If he wanted to forge a real heavenly weapon by himself, he still had to put in the effort and learn systematically. That was because forging weapons was not based on a blueprint. It required creation and combining different materials into one. It was not simply based on a blueprint. There were thousands of materials in the world. If everyone could forge the same heavenly weapon, what would be the difference? In this aspect, no matter how bad the reputation of the King of Junk was, he was qualified to be Lin Yi's teacher. Lin Yi would definitely benefit a lot from observing and learning together. However, although he had agreed to it, Lin Yi estimated that it would take at least a few months to ask the King of Junk for help. That was because the time spent on forging weapons was far more than that on refining elixirs. It could easily take a few months, or even 8 to 10 years. Moreover, Lin Yi had to deal with the newcomer's assessment in the Welcome Pavilion. He did not have that much free time. Therefore, he could only wait until the matter was over. Well, it's okay. Brother Lin, you can do as you please. The patience of a blacksmith is not for show. I can wait no matter how long it takes. The King of Junk did not care at all and kept nodding. For him, it was already a great thing that Lin Yi had agreed to let him forge weapons for him. As for waiting for a period of time, it was not a problem at all. He could wait no matter how long it took. At this moment, the King of Junk even began to think about which auxiliary materials to match the front claws and whiptail of the 9-tailed cloud-piercing bag. Although it was very difficult for him to get anything good with his ability, if he could use some of the scraps in the corner well, it could also have an unexpected magical effect. This was where his core value as an armament master was reflected. Chapter 37-36. What an eccentric scientist. Lin Yi couldn't help but laugh. Not only was he not offended, he even thought more highly of this guy because of this. After all, the profession of forging weapons was the same as alchemy. It was necessary to study hard. The more one could calm down and think deeply, the more likely he was to make a breakthrough. The eccentric character of the King of Junk might not be suitable for dealing with people, but it was not necessarily a bad thing for a forging weapon master. Lin Yi smiled and immediately ignored him. He turned around and walked to a secluded corner. After putting the bag of spirit jade and the front paw and tail of the cloud-piercing leopard into the space of the jade pendant, he then walked towards the inner street. At this time, it was just in the middle of the morning. When Lin Yi walked to the entrance of the inner street, the guards had just moved out the sign for the inner street to signal the people who had been waiting here for a long time to enter. With the first batch of people pouring into the inner street, Lin Yi went straight to the Hong Chamber of Commerce. He couldn't wait to know whether the piece of star inkstone he had been longing for was still there. He entered the attic of the Hong Chamber of Commerce with familiarity, quickly walked up to the second floor, and went straight to the corner where he had found the star inkstone last time. However, when Lin Yi glanced at it, his heart immediately sank. The display case was empty, and the star inkstone was gone. Was he going to miss the opportunity in the end even though he had rushed over so quickly? Lin Yi smiled bitterly. Although he was unwilling, there was no other way. He was going to walk around casually and then go back. After all, it was his luck to get it, but it was his fate to lose it. He had already been mentally prepared for this. However, just as he was about to give up, he suddenly caught a glimpse of a staff member of the Hong Chamber of Commerce carrying an exquisite wooden box as he passed by. The mysterious aura emanating from the wooden box caused his heart to palpitate involuntarily. This situation was exactly the same as when he had discovered the star ink stone. Could it be that the star ink stone was in the wooden box? Lin Yi suddenly had a strong intuition. He hurriedly followed the footsteps of the staff, and then found that the box had been sent to a private room on the side. The last time Lin Yi came here, he had specifically asked around and found out that this private room was a place on the second floor that was specially used to trade valuables. After all, wealth should not be exposed. Some precious treasures that were worth hundreds or even thousands of spirit jades should be traded in a secret place, no matter if it was due to sentiment or reason. If it was placed in a crowded public place like the lobby on the first floor, it would easily attract the attention of people with ulterior motives. The Hong Chamber of Commerce was rich and powerful, so there was nothing to be afraid of. However, customers who had spent a large sum of spiritual jades might not have such confidence. If someone were to follow and launch a sneak attack after leaving the Hong Clan Merchant Association, not only would their treasures be stolen, but they would also be wasting a large amount of spiritual jades. In serious cases they might even be killed. This was no laughing matter. Therefore, for the sake of protecting the customer's privacy, the Hong Chamber of Commerce had specially set up this private room specifically for the trading of valuable items. If a customer had his eye on any valuable treasure outside, he could just go in and discuss the deal with the shopkeeper. The staff of the Hong Chamber of Commerce would help him pack it up, and no outsiders would be able to see what was inside and have any ill intentions. The door to the private room was not tightly shut, it was only ajar. After all, as a businessman, they had to open their doors to welcome customers from all over the world. They could not possibly close down their other businesses just to protect the customer's privacy. That was unrealistic. To be able to specially set up a private room to help customers avoid unnecessary trouble, the Hong Chamber of Commerce was already very considerate. Through the ajar door, Lin Yi immediately saw a familiar figure inside, and his heart skipped a beat. This figure. It was the inner disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion that he had seen last time. Although he was dressed in ordinary clothes instead of the iconic attire of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Lin Yi could still tell that this person was the same person as the one from last time. If he had only guessed that the wooden box might contain a star ink stone, then now, after seeing this competitor, Lin Yi was already completely certain that the contents of this wooden box were undoubtedly the star ink stone. Immediately after, Lin Yi heard the shopkeeper say to this person, "You can open it and check to see if it is what you want. If you are interested, then according to the previous price, it will be 1,000 spirit jades." Due to the large amount of spirit jades, the Hong Chamber of Commerce can send someone to your residence to collect it. 1,000 spirit jades, it was indeed a star ink stone. Lin Yi's heart jumped. After taking a deep breath, he walked into the private room before that person could finalize the deal with the shopkeeper. "Dear customer, what can I do for you?" The shopkeeper immediately turned and smiled at Lin Yi. Although he still had to take care of the deal with this person, this did not prevent him from entertaining Lin Yi. After all, anyone who had the confidence to enter a private room was a nouveau riche with a large amount of spirit jades in their hands. They were the gods of wealth that merchants like them needed to focus on entertaining and winning over. Before Lin Yi could reply, this inner sect disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion looked at him warily. Lin Yi recognized this person without a doubt. This person was the competitor for the star ink stone that he had seen last time, Wuxia. After glancing at Lin Yi, Wuxia also quickly recognized Lin Yi's identity. His heart was instantly filled with shock. He knew that since Lin Yi had appeared here at this time, his intentions were most likely the same as his own. He had also come for the star ink stone. Taking advantage of the fact that Lin Yi's gaze had yet to fall upon the wooden box, he quickly and calmly closed the lid, not wanting Lin Yi to see that the box contained a star ink stone. Although in his eyes, Lin Yi was nothing more than a poor wandering cultivator, and in theory, it was impossible for him to have so many spirit jades to purchase the star ink stone. Since Lin Yi had dared to enter this private room, it meant that he most likely had some confidence. Just in case, it was better to cover it up a little. After all, if Lin Yi really did discover the star ink stone in the wooden box and wanted to compete with him on the spot, That would be somewhat troublesome. Unbeknownst to him, Lin Yi had long since determined that the wooden box contained the star inkstone. At this time, no matter how much he tried to cover it up, it would be futile. However, Lin Yi's expression did not change, and he did not even glance in his direction. Instead, he directly said to the shopkeeper, "Shopkeeper, I saw a piece of star inkstone here last time. Do you still have it in stock?" When these words came out, the originally somewhat nervous Yu's heart immediately trembled. What he feared had really come. Being asked such a question by this fellow Lin Yi, how could a wily old fox like the shopkeeper, who had spent many years in the sea of business, not be unable to detect the business opportunity here? Chapter 37:37. This time, no matter how much Wuxia tried to hide it, it was useless. Looking at the shopkeeper's excited expression, looking at Lin Yi's loathsome face, he wanted to slap himself across the face. If he had known that someone like this would suddenly appear, he would not have said another word and immediately sealed the deal. There would have been no need to drag his feet and have someone bring the item over to inspect it. Now, he had been too smart for his own good. He had been forced to the point where he had to compete with someone else. He had been caught in his own trap. But now that things had come to this, no matter how much regret he felt, it was useless. Right now, the most important thing was to obtain the star inkstone at all costs. This was his greatest hope for rising up in the future. If he missed this chance, he could only be mediocre for the rest of his life, so he definitely could not miss this opportunity. "Shopkeeper, I feel that you should first ask whether or not this person can actually produce 1,000 spirit jades. I am very doubtful of this." Wuxia glanced at Lin Yi with hidden enmity. The shopkeeper paused. After looking Lin Yi up and down, he also seemed to be a bit doubtful. After all, Lin Yi's ordinary appearance really did not seem like someone who could casually produce 1,000 spirit jades. Lin Yi smiled and placed the bag on his back in front of them. He opened the bag for the two of them to see that it was filled to the brim with high-quality spirit jades. This was something he had specially prepared before entering the inner street. Wuxia was instantly shocked. He truly did not think that this unassuming poor wandering cultivator would be able to casually produce so many spirit jades. But when he looked closely, a hint of ridicule appeared on Wuxia's face. He laughed coldly and said, "This bag of spirit jades does look like a lot, but there's 1,000? Heh, I don't think it's even half. You have the nerve to take this out and make a fool of yourself?" The shopkeeper to the side carefully calculated, then nodded and said, "From what I can see, there are about 400 spirit jades in this bag. It is indeed quite far from 1,000 spirit jades. Dear customer, if you can only produce these spirit jades, then I can only say my apologies." "Ha. Shopkeeper has a good eye." Lin Yi smiled faintly. There were indeed only 400 spirit jades in the bag. Even though he still had some in the space in his jade pendant, and had even gotten 200 from Jianghu, some of these spirit jades were waste jades with insufficient spirit jades. They had been thrown into the space in his jade pendant for a short time and hadn't had time to fill up their spirit jades. "Since you cannot produce 1,000 spirit jades, then what are you doing here? Then why are we still here? What a waste of time." Hearing this, Wuxia couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. Turning his head towards the shopkeeper, he said, "Since that's the case, then I'll pay 1,000 spirit jades." "Indeed." The shopkeeper nodded with some regret. He had originally thought that it would be a great situation where two tigers would compete for food. He could earn quite a lot of spirit jades from this, but he didn't expect Lin Yi to only be a bystander, only able to take out 400 spirit jades. He wasn't competitive at all. However, just as the shopkeeper and Wuxia were about to complete the transaction, Lin Yi suddenly spoke up, "Wait, if it's more than 400 spirit jades, I'll sell it to you. What if I add on these 2 foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills?" The two of them stared blankly. Then they saw that at some point in time, an antique little box had appeared in Lin Yi's hand. Wuxia's heart sank. Foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills were also sold in the Hong Merchant Guild, and they were priced at 400 spirit jades. In other words, these 2 foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills were worth 800 spirit jades. Adding on the bag of 400 spirit jades, Lin Yi's bid was equivalent to 1,200 spirit jades, far exceeding his 1,000 spirit jades. Of course, he didn't think that Lin Yi was bragging. Even though the box wasn't open, if there was nothing inside, then Lin Yi would be making a fool of himself. "Dear customer, what do you say?" The shopkeeper turned to look at Wuxia. His meaning was clear. If he couldn't make a higher bid, then this unique piece of starring stone would belong to Lin Yi. Wuxia was silent for a moment. He glared fiercely at Lin Yi. He was determined to get the starring stone, and he wouldn't allow anyone to encroach on it. However, Lin Yi didn't even look at him. In a place like this, spirit jades always spoke. Whoever had more spirit jades would have the right to speak. No matter how much Wuxia glared at him, it was useless. I bid 1,200 spirit jades. Wuxia finally gritted his teeth and said, the Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill is worth 400 spirit jades, but that's the selling price. I don't think it's that high to buy it back. 1,200 spirit jades. This was the upper limit of what he could borrow. It was impossible to add even one more. Because even if they wanted to borrow at a high interest rate, it depended on the person. If it was clearly beyond the upper limit of the person's ability to repay, they wouldn't lend it to you at all. Otherwise, it would be all for naught. Even if you killed the other party, you wouldn't be able to recoup your capital. Although he, Wuxia, was an inner sect disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion, his background wasn't as deep as that of a young master like Su Ling Chong. Normally, he could only borrow 1,000 spirit jades. Being able to borrow 200 more was already a favor price. Wanting to borrow more than that was impossible. However, although he could only offer 1,200 spirit jades, Wuxia was still confident that he could win this piece of starring stone. Because although Lin Yi's 400 spirit jades and 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills were also worth 1,200 spirit jades, one mustn't forget that the price of 1 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill was 400 spirit jades. This was the Hong Merchant Guild's own selling price. In other words, to the Hong Merchant Guild, the cost of a Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill wasn't even 400 spirit jades. In their eyes, it was already at most worth 300 spirit jades. Therefore, the 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills that Lin Yi had taken out were at most worth 600 spirit jades. Adding on 400 spirit jades, it was actually equivalent to a bid of 1,000 spirit jades. Naturally, it couldn't compare to the 1,200 spirit jades he had. Actually, from this angle, Wuxia believed that a bid of 1,100 spirit jades would completely overshadow Lin Yi's. However, he still chose to directly raise the price to the limit that he could afford. In order to ensure that he could win the starring stone, he was throwing caution to the wind. As expected, the shopkeeper nodded and said to Lin Yi, "That's right. Although the price of the Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill is 400 spirit jades, if you want to use it as payment, then it must be calculated according to the recovery price. I can only give you 300 spirit jades. 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills and 400 spirit jades can only be considered as payment of 1,000 spirit jades." Chapter 37-38. By accepting Lin Yi's 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills and 400 spirit jades, the Hong Merchant Association could save themselves the trouble of purchasing goods. But now that Wuxia had called out a price of 1,200, it was equivalent to the 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills being exchanged for spirit jades at the price of 400 per pill. Even the trouble of selling them would be saved. Wuxia looked at Lin Yi with a face full of mockery. He was already 90% sure that he would get this piece of inkstone. From what he saw, unless Lin Yi had no other choice, he definitely wouldn't take out 2 Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills as a bargaining chip. This was probably the entire fortune of this poor wandering cultivator. There was no way he could take out more spirit jades than him. However, Lin Yi opened his mouth and asked in reply, "That's not necessarily the case, right? In the pill display cabinets outside, I saw the same pill with different prices. Could it be that these pills are all sold at the same price?" Hearing this before the shopkeeper could reply, Wuxia, who was at the side, couldn't help but laugh loudly. He pointed at Lin Yi and mocked, as expected of a poor wandering cultivator who hasn't seen the world. "Let me explain to you. Look at those high-priced pills, they're all imported from Middle Island. They're personally refined by a high-level alchemist there. How can they be the same price as locally produced ones? I don't know where you got your pills from, but how can they compare to Master Middle Island's?" Ha ha ha. Lin Yi smiled faintly and didn't say anything to refute. He only opened the lid of the box in front of the 2 of them. Hiss. Looking at the 2 snow-white pills with faint halos, the shopkeeper couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He hurriedly pounced forward to examine them carefully, even bringing a special magnifying glass from the side. However, Wuxia didn't see anything strange. Although he could recognize that these were Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills, he was just a normal cultivator after all. He wasn't a merchant who specialized in trading like the shopkeeper, and he definitely wasn't an expert alchemist. Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills were pills that he would only think of when he was breaking through a barrier. At other times, he wouldn't even have the chance to come into contact with them. However, he saw the shopkeeper's unusual reaction. He was somewhat puzzled. Wasn't it just 2 Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills? What was so rare about it? Although the value of the Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill was not low, it was still a very common pill. If it was replaced with the Foundation Establishment pill, it would still be acceptable. Wuxia disapprovingly curled his lips, but for the sake of the star inkstone, he could only patiently remind, "Shopkeeper, these are just 2 ordinary Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills. According to what you just said, they are worth at most 300 spirit jades each. Even if you add 400 spirit jades, they still can't compare to my bid of 1,200 spirit jades. Just by looking at this kid's poor appearance, you can tell that it's impossible for him to increase the price. What's there to hesitate about? Hurry up, don't waste time." His incessant chatter finally interrupted the shopkeeper's attempt to take a closer look. The shopkeeper stopped and looked at him with a strange expression. "Do you still think that this customer's foundation-breaking pellet is only worth 300 spirit jades?" Even though the shopkeeper hid his expression very well, Wuxia could still clearly feel the mockery hidden within. Wuxia's face reddened, and he forcefully suppressed his anger. "Is it not?" The shopkeeper helplessly shook his head. Even though he felt disdain in his heart, as a businessman, amiability always brought wealth. If he didn't explain it clearly face to face, this Wuxia would probably continue to pester him. He could only patiently say, "You just said that even if it's the same Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill, how much it's worth depends on the quality, right?" "That's right, so what?" Wuxia suddenly had a bad feeling. The shopkeeper patiently explained, "Even if it's the same Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill, the quality is ordinary, so what?" The shopkeeper patiently explained, "Even if it's the same Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill, the quality is ordinary. It can only guarantee a breakthrough to the early stage of Foundation Establishment or the peak of the early stage of Foundation Establishment. If you reach the middle stage of Foundation Establishment, it will be very difficult to have any obvious effect. So the recovery price is at most 300 spirit jades. But if it's imported from the Middle Island, the higher quality Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill can guarantee a successful breakthrough even after the middle stage of Foundation Establishment. The recovery price can be over 400 spirit jades." "So what?" "Shopkeeper, you can't be thinking of telling me that this poor loose cultivator somehow got his hands on a Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill, and that the quality is comparable to Master Nakajima's Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill, right?" Wuxia sneered as he glanced at Lin Yi. Lin Yi responded with a calm smile. He didn't take the other party's provocation to heart at all. Because he didn't need to say anything, there would naturally be people who would slap the other party's face for him. "That's not it." The shopkeeper shook his head. "Then that's incredible." Wuxia's heart instantly relaxed. He was really afraid that this poor loose cultivator, Lin Yi, would somehow get his hands on 2 high-quality Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills. After all, although the probability of this happening wasn't high, if he really ran into some dog-shit luck, there was still a trace of a possibility. However, before he could heave a sigh of relief, the shopkeeper gave him a meaningful look. His eyes seemed to be speechless and pitying at the same time. Only then did he open his mouth and continue. "However, other than the normal and high-quality Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pills, there is also a type called the top quality. Miracle Dr. Dan Zhang Liju's extreme quality Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill was guaranteed to have 100% effect even in the later stages of the Foundation. I'm sure you've heard of this before, sir?" Miracle Dr. Dan Zhang Liju, as a top-level character who came from the North Island, had long become a name card of the North Island. If a practitioner from the North Island hadn't heard of Zhang Liju's story, then they would be too embarrassed to go out and meet people. Elixir God's product must be extreme quality. Wuxia had heard this phrase countless times, and naturally, he had heard of Liju's creation of the ultimate-level foundation-breaking elixir. It was said that back in the day, Zhang Liju had casually sold a supreme-grade foundation-breaking pellet, and the price was easily raised to thousands of spirit jades. It didn't matter how many spirit jades you had, you might not even be able to get one. Normal high-quality foundation breaking pellets simply couldn't compare to it. What do you mean? Extreme quality foundation establishment barrier breaking pill. That's something only an elixir god like Master Zhang can make. Not only does it need to be sold for thousands of spirit jades, but it also needs a deep background to be able to buy it. What does it have to do with a poor loose cultivator like him? Wuxia was confused after hearing the shopkeeper's words. Chapter 37-39. After all, he had been in the library for 3 whole years, and he knew everything in the world without even stepping out. Wuxia wasn't a refiner, but he knew quite a lot about these things. As far as he knew, in the entire 5 islands of Sky Class, there were only a handful of refiners in history who could concoct a supreme-grade foundation breaking pill. After all, someone like Zhang Liju was a genius that appeared once every few hundred years, and no one else could even hope to catch up to him. Normally speaking, being able to concoct a high-quality foundation breaking pill was already considered very rare in the elixir world. In the entire island of Sky Class, there weren't many refiners who could do this, and the North Island's own elixir hall couldn't even concoct it. As for the legendary supreme-grade foundation breaking pill, that was pure wishful thinking. Plus, even if this poor solo practitioner was lucky enough to get his hands on 2 supreme-grade foundation breaking pills, he wouldn't even be able to hide it. How could he just take it out to trade? However, the shopkeeper's next words made Wuxia, who had made a solemn vow, dumbstruck. I'm sorry, even though the highest quality foundation breaking pill is a legend, the 2 pills placed in front of us are the real deal. Sir, you're a real man. I apologize for my rudeness just now. With that, the shopkeeper bowed to Lin Yi. A customer who could casually take out 2 supreme-grade foundation breaking pills like this was a living god of wealth in their eyes. You flatter me. Lin Yi quickly helped him up. Although the shopkeeper wasn't very friendly with him just now, there wasn't anything to criticize about him. He was still rather neutral. However, Wuxia, who was at the side, was completely dumbfounded when he heard this. What the hell? How is that possible? Shopkeeper, you're wrong. How could this poor guy take out a top-grade foundation establishment barrier breaking pill? And 2 of them? Who the hell would believe that? Wuxia was stunned for a while before blurting out. However, his voice hadn't even finished resounding out when the manager's originally amiable expression sank. Saying that the manager had made an error of judgment was like scolding a bald donkey in front of a monk, and it was simply a slap to the face. Furthermore, a supreme-grade foundation breaking pellet was such an important and rare item. How could he have misjudged it? Customer, it's up to you whether you believe in my judgment or not. However, if you speak rudely, I can take it as a provocation to our Hong Chamber of Commerce. Please conduct yourself with dignity. The shopkeeper said with a cold and stern face. As if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head, Wuxia suddenly came to his senses. The Hong Chamber of Commerce was a colossus that even the higher-ups of the 3 great pavilions had to treat with respect. As an inner disciple of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, he could still find a sense of superiority in other places, but in front of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was not even worth a fart. Not to mention how severe the consequences of offending the Hong Chamber of Commerce would be. Just take the current situation as an example. The star inkstone that he yearned for day and night was still in the hands of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Wuxia hurriedly smiled sheepishly and tried to salvage the situation. Shopkeeper, please don't take it to heart. I was just anxious and made a slip of the tongue. Only then did the shopkeeper's expression soften a little. Looking at him, he said, just these 2 top-grade foundation establishment barrier breaking pills alone, even if the lowest recovery price is 800 spirit jades per pill, it would still be worth it. It was already worth 1,600 pieces of spiritual jades. Adding the additional 400 spiritual jades, it was a total of 2,000 spiritual jades. Dear customer, if you can't offer a price of 2,000 spiritual jades or more, then I will have to pay. Then don't even think about getting that piece of staring stone. Even though he said that, in the shopkeeper's heart, even if Wuxia could take out 2,000 spiritual jades, it wouldn't be enough to make up for Lin Yi's 2 foundation establishment barrier breaking pills. After all, if it was in the name of a supreme-grade foundation breaking pill. By attracting a group of second-generation cultivators to participate in the auction, the true profits that could be generated would definitely be far greater than 2,000 spiritual jades. 3,000. 4,000 was not a problem at all. 2,000 spiritual jades? Fuck, why don't you just rob someone? Wuxia was so agitated that his eyeballs almost popped out of his head. Fortunately, his reaction was fast enough to cover his mouth with one hand. Only then did he manage to prevent himself from cursing out loud. Otherwise, he probably would have been thrown out on the spot. Just now, he had called out a price of 1,200 spiritual jades, which was already his limit. He had even taken an extremely large risk. 2,000 spiritual jades, even if you beat him to death, he wouldn't be able to take it out. Not to mention how shocked Wuxia was, at this moment, even Lin Yi, the owner of the Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill, couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard the shopkeeper's words. Before, he only knew that the value of a Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill was definitely much higher than a normal Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill. But he didn't expect it to be this high. But after thinking about it for a moment, Lin Yi very quickly figured out the reason. After all, a Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill was not the same as a normal Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill. This was a rare resource that could only be encountered by luck. As the saying goes, the rarer something is, the greater its value. For the shopkeeper to convert these 2 Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills into 1,600 spiritual jades, this was already a very, very low price. If they were to really sell it, the price would at least double. Moreover, no matter how high the price, there would definitely be people fighting to buy it. Especially those second-generation cultivators with truly deep backgrounds. In order to get their hands on such a rare treasure, they wouldn't care about this bit of spiritual jades. However, although he had underestimated the value of these 2 Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills, Lin Yi didn't feel the pain of losing out. After all, to him, as long as he had the materials prepared, he could refine another Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pill at any time, and he would definitely be able to refine a Supreme Grade one. However, there was only one starring stone, and if he missed it, there would be no more. Thus, 2 Supreme Grade Foundation Establishment Barrier Breaking Pills and 400 spiritual jades in exchange for a single starring stone was absolutely worth it. The shopkeeper waited for a moment. Seeing that Wuxia's face had turned red and he didn't say anything, he said, "Time is precious. Dear customer, if you cannot quickly give a higher price, then this old man can only announce that the starring stone is not fated with you." Not fated with me? How can it not be fated with me? I've endured hardships in the scripture pavilion for a full 3 years before finally discovering this priceless treasure that could change my fate. For this, not only did I borrow a high-interest loan of 1,200 spiritual jades, I even thought about it day and night for an entire month, and now I've actually announced that it's not fated with me. Fuck you, it's not fated with me. At this moment, Wuxia's expression had already become extremely twisted and sinister. It was only because he still had a last shred of reason that he was able to tightly bite his lip and not say anything. Because he knew that if he spoke the slightest bit rudely now, then he would have to face the overseeing experts of the Hong Merchant Guild. The strength of these people was comparable to the core disciples of the 3 great pavilions, and they were not people that he, Wuxia, could afford to offend. Chapter 3740. Seeing him gnash his teeth in anger, the shopkeeper couldn't help but shake his head, then directly announced, "Looks like the result is already very obvious. Sir, can I ask you to step back for a moment?" The shopkeeper's expression was still polite, but his words were not courteous at all. Wuxia knew that if he stepped back now, that would mean that this unique starring stone that he had been longing for would belong to Lin Yi, and he would have to return empty-handed. This meant that he, Wuxia, had worked so hard for so long, but in the end, not only did he end up with nothing, he even carried a body of debt because of it. One had to know that although the 1,200 pieces of spirit jade he had borrowed were still piled up in his cave residence and hadn't been put to use, he still had to pay an enormous amount of interest every day. He had only borrowed it for a few short days, but just the interest alone had already reached a shocking 3 digits, and it would only roll up in the future. Originally, if he had been able to successfully obtain the starring stone, Wuxia wouldn't have cared about this bit of spirit jade at all. As long as he became stronger in the future, not only would these people not ask him to return the spirit jade, but they would instead rush to give him spirit jade, using him as their protective umbrella. But now, his originally beautiful vision was instantly shattered, and what awaited him was cruel reality. Those high-interest lenders would definitely come knocking on his door to force him to pay back the debt, and with his current strength, he couldn't afford to offend these people. One had to know that these people weren't good people. In this way, How miserable his fate would be in the future. Even using his toes to think about it could be imagined. In a short instant, he had fallen from heaven to hell. At this time, Wuxia wasn't just roaring in his heart, he was hysterical, and he was gradually going crazy. But no matter how hysterical he was, Wuxia didn't show it on his face. To the bystanders, he was just silently and unwillingly biting his lip, nothing more. Wuxia glanced at Lin Yi sinisterly, then turned and walked out of the private room. This star inkstone will forever belong to me and me alone. No one can snatch it away. A mere grassroots wandering practitioner dares to fight with me. He really doesn't even know how to write the word death. Sir, when you leave our Hong Merchant Guild later, you have to be careful. Looking at Wuxia's departing figure, the shopkeeper couldn't help but remind Lin Yi. He had been in the Hong Chamber of Commerce for decades and had met countless people. He had seen this kind of situation many times. No matter how well a brat like Wuxia hid, he couldn't escape his fiery eyes. Thanks for the reminder. Lin Yi smiled faintly. Actually, there was no need for the shopkeeper to remind him. Just now, when the other party had looked at him, he had already felt a sharp killing intent. Although it was hidden very deeply, the insidiousness within it was enough to make one tremble in fear. If he couldn't even detect this, then he would be too slow. It seemed like it would be a little troublesome to go out later. Lin Yi sighed inwardly. From the opponent's aura, he could tell that the opponent's strength should be around the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, which was a level higher than his. Although he was never afraid of challenging those with higher cultivation levels, the risk was not small. However, it was just a little risky. Lin Yi had killed his way up from the mortal world. He never knew what fear was. So what if the other party was a middle-stage foundation building expert? If he really didn't know what was good for him and bumped into him, a massacre might begin. Lin Yi had been on the Heavenly Island for more than a month, but he had never killed anyone. Looking at Lin Yi's calm and composed performance, the shopkeeper immediately thought even more highly of him. Because Lin Yi didn't deliberately hide his aura, he could tell that Lin Yi was a peak early-stage foundation building expert. And as a peak early-stage foundation building expert, when faced with the threat of a middle-stage foundation building expert, he could still maintain such a calm and composed attitude. However, he was still able to maintain such a calm composure. This was quite a rare thing. If it was someone else, they would have already panicked and didn't know how to deal with it. It seemed like this customer was able to casually take out 2 foundation establishment barrier breaking pills because he had a strong background, and not because he got lucky. After this bit of admiration, the shopkeeper's attitude was much more polite and attentive than before. He took the initiative to ask, "I am Hong Zhong, may I know your name?" Under normal circumstances, a shopkeeper like Hong Zhong was obviously more polite and attentive. Even if he was polite to others, it was only on the surface. He rarely took the initiative to tell others his name. After all, although he was just a shopkeeper of a branch, the Hong's Chamber of Commerce was a first-class top chamber of commerce in Middle Island. Any shopkeeper of a branch had huge resources in his hands. Even the top figures of the 3 pavilions in the North Island were jealous of him. His identity and status were self-evident. Even the core disciples of the 3 pavilions couldn't be compared with him. What's more, Hong Zhong's surname was Hong. The meaning behind this was self-evident. Although Hong Zhong was a collateral relative of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was still a member of the Hong family. Since he took the initiative to ask for the guest's name, it meant that the guest had become a special guest that the Hong Enterprises Chamber of Commerce needed to take special care of. This was a good thing that many people yearned for. In the whole North Island, there were not many people who had this qualification. My surname is Lin, and my name is Air. Lin Yi bowed slightly as he replied. So it's young hero Lin. How about we start the transaction now? You can have a look at what you want first. Hong Zhong knew that Lin Yi couldn't wait to get his hands on the star inkstone, so he immediately pushed the wooden box containing the star inkstone in front of Lin Yi and suggested, "Okay." Lin Yi nodded. He opened the box and looked at it carefully. After confirming that it was the same star inkstone he saw last time, he said, "I have no problem with it." "Okay." Hong Zhong immediately packed up the wooden box, and Lin Yi naturally handed over his 2 supreme-grade bottleneck breaking pills and the bag of 400 pieces of spirit jade on the ground to him. One handed over the money, and the other handed over the goods. After the money and goods were settled, Lin Yi finally felt relieved. The star inkstone he had been dreaming of was finally in his hands. Although he didn't know what it was used for at the moment, he would know after he went back and asked the ghost. Something that could attract the attention of this big shot of the Spirit Beast clan must be a treasure that could only be encountered by chance. After the transaction, Hong Zhong took out a dark green jade card from the cabinet and handed it to Lin Yi. Young hero Lin, this is a Spirit Jade card. It is recognized and used not only by our Hong Enterprises Chamber of Commerce, but also by all the other large regular merchants on the 5 Heaven Stage Islands. It can be used as a substitute for real Spirit Jade. This way, when you buy such valuable items next time, you can directly use the Spirit Jade card. You won't have to struggle to carry a whole bag of Spirit Jade like this time. That was equivalent to the Union Pay card in the secular world? Chapter 3741. The pure spiritual energy inside circulated, as if it contained an extremely exquisite miniature formation. This was obviously a very rare and high-quality item. And in the middle of the Spirit Jade card, there was a number. 400. Lin Yi immediately turned his head to look at Hong Zhong in surprise. Did this mean that the extra bag of 400 pieces of Spirit Jade was directly returned to him in the form of a Spirit Jade card? Hong Zhong smiled at the right time and said, "This is a small token of my humble shop, please accept it. If you have a large amount of Spirit Jade, you can find a large merchant like our Hong Merchant Guild at any time and ask them to top up the Spirit Jade into the Spirit Jade card." After a pause, seeing that Lin Yi seemed to have some doubts, Hong Zhong continued to explain, "Young hero Lin, please do not worry. The Spirit Jade card has a special miniature formation to protect it. As long as you input your chi to activate it, the miniature formation inside will recognize your unique chi characteristics. No one else can imitate it, change it, or destroy it. And if you need to make a transaction, you only need to input your chi to combine it with another Spirit Jade card to make a payment. It is convenient and safe. Because every time you use the Spirit Jade card at a large merchant guild, you will leave relevant information at the merchant union, so even if you accidentally lose it, it is fine. You can find the merchant union to make a replacement." So, wasn't this a union link card that had been personally authenticated by Qi? If it was really as Hong Zhong said, then the security of this Spirit Jade card was indeed quite high. There was the possibility of someone chopping off their finger to impersonate their fingerprint. But for this Spirit Jade card, unless Lin Yi actively input his chi for it to identify, even if others killed him, they would not be able to take away even a piece of Spirit Jade. "Then thank you very much, shopkeeper Hong." Lin Yi nodded his head in gratitude. Although he had the space in the Jade Pendant and did not need to worry about things like storing Spirit Jade, if he wanted to go to a place like the Hong Merchant Guild to buy treasures, it would still be a little troublesome. In order to prevent the secret of the space in the Jade Pendant from being exposed, he had to first take out the Spirit Jade in a place with no one around, then carry it to the Merchant Guild to buy things. Like today, a few hundred Spirit Jade was not a big deal. He could carry it, but what if he needed thousands or even tens of thousands of Spirit Jade in the future? He couldn't possibly carry it back and forth, right? Thus, this Spirit Jade card was very useful at this time. Moreover, since the Merchant Union, whose influence spread throughout the 5 great islands, came forward to vouch for them, their credibility was not an issue. Naturally, there was no reason not to accept it. Young hero Lin is too polite. For an important guest like you, preparing a Spirit Jade card for you is a matter of mutual benefit. It will also make it convenient for you to take care of our business in the future, so there is no need to thank me. Alright, if you use the Spirit Jade card in the various chambers of commerce under the Merchant Union, you can get a 10% discount, Hong Zhong said politely with a smile. 10% discount? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. In the future, if he were to use this card to purchase some treasures, he would be able to save quite a bit of spiritual jade. It seemed that the Commerce Union had put in quite a bit of capital in order to attract big customers. In fact, on this point, Lin Yi was wrong. Although the Spirit Jade card was an important measure pushed out by the Merchant Union to protect their big customers. But while it was used for transactions, it was essentially a symbol of status. It was not that easy to obtain. Not to mention the fact that it was difficult for ordinary people to obtain one. Even some second-generation cultivators with a good background, if their status or wealth did not reach a certain threshold, would not be able to obtain such a Spirit Jade card. To put it bluntly, in the entire world of cultivators, those who could produce a Spirit Jade card, that person was definitely rich and powerful. And for Lin Yi to be able to obtain this Spirit Jade card today, it was all thanks to the 2 top-grade foundation barrier breaking pills. Otherwise, He would not have been able to obtain the true approval of the Hong Merchant Union, even if he had paid thousands of spiritual jade for a single star inkstone. Moreover, he would not have been able to obtain a spirit jade card from Hong Zhong for no reason. There were even 400 spiritual jade cards in it. Hong Zhong's actions clearly meant that he was planning on taking the long haul. Fishing for a big fish. Based on his years of experience with countless people, this young man who called himself Lin Er, although he looked ordinary at first glance, in reality, he was a person who hid his strength deeply. Not to mention the fact that this guy, who was only at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment, could remain calm and composed in the face of the threat of a mid-stage foundation establishment expert. Just the fact that he could casually produce 2 top-grade foundation barrier-breaking pills was enough to prove that this person was not to be trifled with. Regardless of where he had obtained these 2 foundation barrier-breaking pills, treasures of heaven and earth had always belonged to the strong. For this Lin Er to be able to casually produce 2 top-grade foundation barrier-breaking pills either meant that he was hiding a powerful strength, or that he had a powerful background. There was no third possibility. As for the so-called dog shit luck, Hong Zhong had been the shopkeeper of the Hong Merchant Union for so many years and had seen all kinds of people and things. He had long since recognized this point. In this world of cultivators where cunning people were everywhere and crafty plots and schemes were everywhere, anything that seemed to be a coincidence actually hid a hidden certainty. There was no such thing as dog shit luck. Treasures like the top-grade foundation barrier-breaking pills would only fall into the hands of the strong. There were no exceptions. And those who believed that dog shit luck existed in the world of cultivation, in the end, had not lived long enough to understand. They believed that other people were just idiots who had dog shit luck, but in reality, they themselves were the idiots who had been deceived by appearances. Powerful strength and powerful background, these two were definitely one. Thus, in Hong Zhong's eyes, Lin Yi naturally had value in befriending and developing. Gifting Lin Yi a spirit jade card and 400 spirit jades was just a test. If Lin Yi's performance in the future became even more awesome, even greater benefits were yet to come. Thank you, shopkeeper Hong, for your kindness. Then, I will take my leave first. Lin Yi put away the spirit jade card and the star inkstone, stood up and said his goodbyes. Young hero Lin, take care. Hong Zhong stood up to send him off. Before he left, he added, Young hero Lin, in the future, if you have something as good as a top-grade foundation barrier-breaking pill that you want to sell, there is no harm in taking care of our Hong Merchant Union's business. When the time comes, if the accumulated value is considerable, this old man can help you upgrade your Spirit Jade card to a VIP Spirit Jade card, allowing you to enjoy a 20% discount and even more benefits. As a businessman, Hong Zhong was actually more curious than anyone else. Why was Lin Yi able to produce 2 top-grade foundation barrier-breaking pills? But even if he thought with his toes, he would know that this involved personal privacy. If he asked on the spot, then he wouldn't be Hong Zhong. Chapter 3742. As an old shopkeeper of the Hong Chamber of Commerce for decades, Hong Zhong's grasp of people's hearts could only be described with one word: shrewd and ruthless. All right, then I'll have to trouble you when the time comes. Lin Yi nodded and turned to leave. Lin Yi's heart was as clear as a mirror why Hong Zhong was so attentive to him. To put it bluntly, it was because of the 2 foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills that gave rise to all sorts of mysterious speculations. He wanted to rope Lin Yi in and create more profits for them. This was something that every businessman with foresight would do. It was just that this shopkeeper gene was more experienced and outstanding, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. Lin Yi was not averse to this kind of thing. In reality, when he first came to Heaven Stage Island, he was in need of this kind of business partner. After all, of the 4 most important things for cultivators, wealth, dharma, companionship, and land, wealth ranked first. Only with a strong wealth could one ensure an endless supply of treasures and level up quickly, all the way to the top of the cultivation world. This wealth, of course, did not refer to the wealth of the secular world, but the hard currency of the cultivation world, such as spirit jades. Although Lin Yi could secretly hide 2 or 3 pieces of spirit jades in the spirit jade mining area every day, and sometimes he could use Meng Tong's group to exchange their waste jades for good jades to increase a little, in the end, it could only be considered a small business, and was far from reaching the level of wealth. If he really wanted to unleash the full potential of money, he'd have to make it big. Unavoidably, he'd need to find a reliable business partner. That was the only way he'd be able to unleash his trump cards to the fullest, paving the way for future growth. From the short contact just now, Hong Zhong, the old shopkeeper of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, definitely had the ability to become his business partner. If they could really work closely together, with Lin Yi's trump cards and Hong Zhong's shrewd business ability, it would not be difficult for them to make a name for themselves in the future. Of course, time revealed a person's heart. This matter was related to the future. Lin Yi had to carefully investigate the importance of this matter. Unless he truly knew everything, he would not easily treat anyone as a business partner. At most, he would just use each other. After all, this was a matter of life and death, so he could not be too cautious. After leaving the Hong Chamber of Commerce, Lin Yi was not in a hurry to return to the welcoming pavilion. Instead, he leisurely strolled around the inner street 2 more times. After all, the inner street was only open to the public once a month. Taking advantage of this rare opportunity, he naturally had to familiarize himself with it. There were some things that even if he didn't buy them for the time being, he still had to have an idea in mind. If he could use them in the future, he would be able to use them. He wouldn't be wasting his energy like a headless fly. After strolling through the inner streets, Lin Yi finally left the city square and prepared to return to the welcoming pavilion. However, just as he reached a deserted alley, the jade pendant suddenly began to sound a warning. A fatal sneak attack was about to happen. An extremely sharp sword chi came from a very tricky angle and attacked Lin Yi's back from 100 feet away. It was so fast that it was impossible to defend against it. Relying on the speed bonus of the gale-chasing lightning boots, Lin Yi instantly displayed the butterfly subtle steps to the extreme. Only then did he twist his body, barely dodging the menacing fatal blow. Even so, he still felt a lingering fear in his heart. This sword chi wasn't dazzling. At first glance, it looked sloppy and ordinary. Even the sword chi released by many heaven stage experts could be 100 times stronger than this. However, the power of the two could not be mentioned in the same breath. If the power of the sword chi of those heaven stage experts was said to be 1, which Lin Yi could completely disregard, then the power of this sword chi was at least 800, or even 1,000. If Lin Yi hadn't been able to dodge in time, the only outcome would have been death. If not for the jade pendant's life-saving warning, Lin Yi might have already reported to the underworld. Even if Lin Yi wanted to heal, he would need time. Wouldn't the other party take the opportunity to stab him again? A mere grassroots loose cultivator was actually able to dodge my life-seizing consecutive sword 22 styles. Not bad. A familiar figure slowly walked out from the tree trunk by the roadside. It was Wuxia, who had just competed for the Star Inkstone at the Hong Chamber of Commerce. As expected, it was this fellow. Lin Yi had long expected this. Previously, when this fellow was at the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he had already revealed a cold killing intent. It was just that he didn't dare to make a move in that kind of situation. After leaving the Hong Chamber of Commerce, Lin Yi intentionally circled the inner street twice. Actually, the main reason was to find out this fellow's position, because he knew that this fellow would definitely follow him and attack him. However, the result was somewhat unexpected. After circling the inner street twice, even with Lin Yi's perception, he still couldn't find any traces of this fellow. Only then did he helplessly give up and leave the market. In reality, from the time he left the market until now, it had already been a full 30 minutes. Even with Lin Yi's cautiousness, he couldn't help but start to wonder if this fellow had already given up. Thus, a moment of carelessness brought danger. Although Lin Yi's expression was calm, he secretly sighed in his heart. If it wasn't for the jade pendant's warning, just now, this fellow really would have succeeded. This fellow clearly knew that he was at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. With the strength of a mid-stage foundation establishment expert, he still foolishly followed him for so long before making a move. Moreover, he didn't care about his dignity at all and chose to launch an unavoidable sneak attack. Whether it was patience or cautiousness, it clearly showed that this fellow was definitely not an ordinary person. Compared to his superficial performance at the Hong Chamber of Commerce, he was like a completely different person. Looking at the strong confidence displayed in Wuxia's playful expression, Lin Yi's heart instantly tightened. This fellow had already been acting since the time at the Hong Chamber of Commerce. The superficiality he displayed at that time was completely an act to numb him, and make him think that this person was only a sos. This fellow was far more powerful and cunning than the likes of Meng Jueguang. This was an out-and-out strong enemy. Lin Yi's expression didn't change as he stared at the other party's every move, but his heart was already extremely vigilant. Although he had been at Heaven Stage Island for more than a month, he had already seen many strong people, and even personally felt the power of an elder-level expert. Their strength was far above this person in front of him. However, at the end of the day, these people that he had seen before were not real enemies. They had never so openly displayed their killing intent towards Lin Yi. Even if it was Su Lingchong, Meng Jueguang, who had deep grudges against him, if they wanted to kill him, they would have to rack their brains to find a suitable opportunity. They wouldn't be like this person in front of him, directly killing him without saying anything. Chapter 3743. Lin Yi laughed bitterly to himself. After wearing this thing, he could hide his identity and do many things that were originally inconvenient, but at the same time, it was equivalent to losing a layer of protection. Don't forget, the three great pavilions always valued newcomers. Anything that involved newcomers was not a small matter. Especially if a newcomer was killed, it would definitely alarm the enforcement hall. As a result, even a young master with a deep background like Su Lingchong didn't dare to use simple and crude methods to deal with Lin Yi. He could only use some underhanded schemes. As for other people, they didn't have the guts to do so. Even if they became enemies with Lin Yi, they definitely wouldn't dare to directly kill him. But right now it was different. Because he was wearing the Thousand Silk Mask, Lin Yi was no longer Lin Yi, but Lin Air. Lin Yi was a newcomer to Blue Cloud Pavilion, but this Lin Air was only a grassroots wandering cultivator of unknown origin. Killing Lin Yi, a Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomer, would cause enormous trouble. But if it was just killing Lin Air, a grassroots wandering cultivator, then nothing would happen. As long as it wasn't in broad daylight, the enforcement hall wouldn't care if you committed murder or arson. What did the life and death of a mere grassroots wandering cultivator have to do with them? If you're a little smarter, then hurry up and hand over the inkstone. That way, I might be able to quell my anger a bit, and I'll leave your corpse intact. Wuxia stared at Lin Yi with a mocking expression, not immediately attacking. He wasn't the slightest bit afraid that Lin Yi would escape. Because in the current situation, Lin Yi was like a mouse that had been forced into a corner by a cat. There was no way for him to escape. A mere peak early-stage foundation establishment wandering cultivator, facing a middle-stage foundation establishment intersect disciple like him, still wanted to escape? How could he escape? Can I ask, what is the use of this star inkstone? Lin Yi was unhurried, raising his eyebrows as he asked. Of course, he didn't really want to know the use of the star inkstone. This kind of thing didn't need the other party to explain. When he returned, the ghost would naturally explain to him. The reason why he intentionally asked this was because he wanted to know how much the other party knew. From there, he could make a judgment. Just how important was it to kill him? That's right, Lin Yi wasn't thinking about escaping, but counterattacking. Although his opponent was a middle-stage foundation establishment expert, and even among middle-stage foundation establishment experts, Lin Yi still had the confidence to kill him. Although it was very difficult to challenge someone of a higher level at the same time, it also had a unique advantage, and that was the natural appearance of a weakling. He could pretend to be a pig to eat the tiger. No matter how cautious his opponent was, he would more or less underestimate his opponent because he thought that he had the absolute upper hand. This was inevitable human nature. The cunning and cruel opponent in front of him was the same. Otherwise, this guy would have killed him long ago. He wouldn't even stop to talk nonsense. Regardless of the level of an expert, underestimating the enemy was always a flaw. Especially when facing a so-called weakling like Lin Yi who had a powerful trump card, this flaw was especially fatal. You don't know the uses of star inkstones? After hearing Lin Yi's question, Wuxia was clearly dazed. He didn't know that Lin Yi had so many twists and turns. He had thought that Lin Yi just wanted to clarify things before he died. Wuxia had a ruminating expression as he sized up Lin Yi. He didn't know the uses of star inkstones, but he still dared to take out 2 supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills. This meant that not only was this wandering cultivator not poor at all, but he was a rare nouveau riche? I only know that this thing isn't simple. As for its uses, I don't know, Lin Yi responded coolly. Heh. Then prepare to die with everlasting regret. You aren't so naive as to think that Laozi will be so merciful as to tell you, right? You're really delusional. Who do you think Laozi is? An idiot? Wuxia laughed coldly, and a hint of savagery flashed through his eyes. He seemed to be preparing to attack. Lin Yi's heart instantly sank. This guy was not easy to deal with. But then, he heard Wuxia continue, but if you hand over something valuable, like a supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill, then Laozi can let you die knowing. So he wanted to use this opportunity to extort a sum of money. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth curved imperceptibly. He reached into his bosom. When he took it out again, there was a small box in his hand, just like the one he had in the Hong Merchant Guild. He opened the lid. Inside was a supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill. Last time, he had refined a total of 6 pills. He had given 2 to senior apprentice Brother Bitter, eaten 1 for Lin Yi, and used 2 to exchange for starring stones. The one in his hand was the last one. Seeing the supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill, Yuxia's face was filled with greed. Putting aside the fact that the staring stone was a priceless treasure that could change the course of one's fate, the supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill was a fatal temptation to any foundation establishment cultivator, even those at the peak of the late stage. This Wuxia in front of him was no exception. At the end of the day, even if he could obtain the staring stone, he wouldn't be able to use it immediately. Right now, the practicality of a supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill was far above it. Moreover, this was also a priceless treasure that could only be found by luck. Anything else? If you can take out even more good stuff that satisfies Laozi, then maybe I can consider letting you go. Wuxia purposely tempted. Letting me go? Hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This guy really did think he was an idiot. If he really took out even more valuable treasures, this guy would probably immediately start killing and plundering. There was no way he would let Lin Yi go. That's it. Now you can speak, right? Lin Yi said expressionlessly. Hearing this, Wuxia couldn't help but shake his head in disappointment. That really is a pity. But to be able to obtain a supreme-grade foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill, today's trip was not in vain. Of course, I believe that you're definitely hiding some good stuff on you. Since you don't want to take it out yourself, then I'll take it out for you. As he spoke, Wuxia's feet instantly exploded, and he pounced towards Lin Yi at a speed that was hard to follow with the naked eye. From start to finish, he had never thought of telling Lin Yi anything, and had even less thought of sparing Lin Yi's life. The reason why he spoke so much nonsense was only because he wanted to extort even more good stuff from Lin Yi. However, since Lin Yi wasn't willing to take it out of his own accord, then he wouldn't force it. In any case, after he killed Lin Yi, these things would still fall into his hands. It was just that during the course of battle, they might be damaged by the sword qi. But since the situation had already developed to this point, if it was damaged, then so be it. He would kill first and talk later. Chapter 3744. Wait! Lin Yi suddenly shouted and placed the foundation barrier-breaking pill in front of him. He laughed coldly and said, "If you don't mind me destroying it right now, then bring it on." Before he finished speaking, Wuxia's footsteps instantly stopped. He looked at Lin Yi with a murderous look. Even though he had absolute confidence that he could kill Lin Yi and take back the star ink stone, if this dragged on, there was no telling if something unexpected would happen. After all, if he was seen by other experts who were passing by, it would be troublesome. However, even though he wholeheartedly wanted to kill Lin Yi as soon as possible, he couldn't bear to part with this foundation barrier-breaking pill. Just like how he had absolute confidence in killing Lin Yi, if Lin Yi truly wanted to destroy the pill in his hands, it would only take a single thought for him to do so. He wouldn't be able to stop him in time. Fine, then I'll tell you the uses of the star ink stone and let you die knowing. But before that, you have to give it to me first, Wuxia said in a low voice. Lin Yi couldn't help but sneer. Do you really think I'm an idiot? If I gave this foundation barrier-breaking pill to you right now, would you still be wasting your breath with me? Then tell me, what do you want me to do to make you feel at ease? Don't say stupid things like I'll tell you first and then give it to me. If that's the case, I'd rather just kill you, Wuxia said with a gloomy face. Hearing this, Lin Yi laughed in spite of himself. As a grand middle-stage foundation establishment expert, no one would come to a place like this. In other words, no one would be able to save me. My little life is already in your hands. Do you still need to be so petty? If I'm lying to you, at worst you can just torture me and make me beg for death. Wouldn't that be enough? In any case, you won't lose anything. If my character is good and I keep my word, perhaps I can even get a foundation barrier-breaking pill. This kind of opportunity doesn't come often. Wuxia looked deeply at Lin Yi. After a moment of silence, He suddenly laughed loudly and said, "All right, since you are a person who is about to die, there is no harm in telling you now. The number of people on Heaven's Step Island who know the use of this star inkstone definitely doesn't exceed the number of fingers on one hand. I flipped through all the ancient scriptures in the library pavilion, and only then did I stumble upon an ancient remnant. Although you are about to die, I have to say that you are very lucky." Lin Yi listened attentively without batting an eyelid. A slight ripple appeared in his heart. In that case, this piece of staring stone really did have a significant background. Pausing for a moment, Wuxia took a deep breath and said, "According to the records of that ancient remnant page, star inkstone is produced in deep trenches at the bottom of the sea. Over the course of millions and millions of years, it has absorbed the essence of the seabed. As for us cultivators, this is the most generous gift from the heavens. Whoever obtains it will become the strongest golden core stage expert. There is no one else who can compete with it." The strongest golden core expert. Lin Yi was immediately shocked. Ever since coming to Heaven Step Island, although the people he came into contact with the most were newcomers who hadn't reached foundation establishment. Other than some special occasions, senior apprentice brother Ku Bai, who was at foundation establishment, basically couldn't come into contact with experts above foundation establishment. However, this didn't mean that Lin Yi didn't have any concept of the 3 words golden core stage. After all, for cultivators, this was the most basic of common knowledge. The reason why the Welcome Pavilion didn't set up a corresponding teaching curriculum was because this common knowledge was too basic. Like things like strength levels, it was just like eating and drinking for ordinary people. There was no need to waste time teaching them. As long as they went out to interact with people and casually said a few words, they would naturally understand. Simply put, on Heaven Step Island, those below foundation establishment were not considered to have started. Foundation establishment was considered the beginning. Golden core was considered to have stepped into the ranks of experts. Although according to common sense, cultivators who could cultivate to the golden core stage were already geniuses that were 1 in 10,000. However, it should be known that there were also differences between geniuses. The golden core stage was the clearest dividing line between all geniuses. It determined the height that each cultivator could reach in the future. For those who were weaker, no matter how hard they worked and how much resources they consumed, they had no hope of breaking through in this lifetime. They could only helplessly stop at the early golden core stage. For those who were slightly better, although there was hope to continue to the next level, even if they could break through, they could only become the weakest among the experts of the same level. The rest of their lives were fixed, and there was almost no possibility of a counterattack. Looking at all the golden core stage experts, only the most outstanding few could break through all the way and become the group of people who stood at the top of Heaven Step Island. It was no exaggeration to say that the golden core stage was a natural moat in front of all cultivators. Whether or not one could cross it, and how one crossed it, would directly affect whether one was a dragon or a worm in the future. The strongest foundation establishment stage experts might gradually become trash after breaking through, but the strongest golden core stage experts had never been like this before. This was because for thousands of years, history had clearly shown that anyone who could become invincible in the golden core stage, as long as they were not killed midway, would inevitably grow into the group of people who stood at the top of Heaven Step Island in the future. There was no exception. This guy was so ambitious. Lin Yi looked at Wuxia, whose eyes were burning with passion, and felt that he did not think much of it. It was not that he did not care about the golden core stage, but he was currently only at the peak of the early foundation establishment stage. The most important thing now was how to break through to the middle foundation establishment stage. Thinking about becoming the strongest golden core stage expert at this time was really too ambitious. He was like this, and this Wuxia, who was only in the middle foundation establishment stage, was also the same. At this time, instead of thinking about becoming the strongest golden core stage expert, it was more practical to think about how to become the peak of the middle foundation establishment stage expert. As for the golden core stage, whether or not he could live until then was still unknown. It was better to work hard towards the peak of the late foundation establishment stage first. However, in the face of such temptation, not everyone could maintain their calm like Lin Yi. In reality, if Lin Yi did not have these heaven-defying golden fingers like the space in the jade pendant, and suddenly encountered a treasure that could make him the strongest golden core stage expert, perhaps he would be like Wuxia, unable to extricate himself. Of course, a calm heart was a calm heart. Right now, Lin Yi's expectations towards the star inkstone were no less than Wuxia's. He, who had all kinds of powerful trump cards, had a higher chance of advancing to the golden core stage than others. The significance of the star inkstone was naturally greater to him, but he would not let it get to his head. Ha! This kid actually knows this kind of secret. Interesting. In his mind, the ghost's long-lost voice suddenly rang out. Chapter 3745. Although Xianxia spoke with certainty and didn't seem to be lying, this fellow was still an enemy. It was more reliable to ask the ghost for confirmation. That's right. In the entire Heavenly Stage Island, the number of people who know of the secret can be counted on one hand. If I hadn't heard about it from the Spirit Beast King, even I wouldn't have known. The ghost explained, the greatest use of the Starring Stone is to help people perfectly break through to the Golden Core stage. This kind of person is much stronger than experts who break through other methods. Although saying that they are invincible in the Golden Core stage is a bit exaggerated, it's not far off. As long as one's talent is passable, with the help of this thing, it won't be a problem for them to become a big shot in the future. That's why I had you think of a way to buy it. So that's how it is. Lin Yi couldn't help but gratefully say, many thanks for Senior's guidance. If it weren't for your reminder, I would have missed this opportunity to obtain this star inkstone. Although the ghost didn't explain in detail, Lin Yi was able to figure out a few things from the words perfectly breaking through to the Golden Core stage. Just like when he broke through to the Foundation Establishment stage, there were many ways to break through to the Golden Core stage. Although none of them were easy, using the star inkstone to break through to the Golden Core stage was, as expected, the most powerful method. Otherwise, it wouldn't be worthy of the title, perfectly breaking through to the Golden Core stage. Jia, if you really want to thank this old man, then in the future, think of a way to get me some fresh Spirit Beast cores. The higher the grade, the better. This old man has great use for them. The ghost cackled. Wasn't this fellow an elder of the Spirit Beast clan? He actually wanted him to get fresh Spirit Beast cores, and the higher the grade, the better. Wasn't this encouraging him to hunt down the Spirit Beast clan? Okay. Although Lin Yi was puzzled, he didn't ask. In any case, if there was a suitable opportunity, he would do as he was told. That's right, although very few people know about the Starring Stone, it is still a rare treasure. I don't need to teach you the principle that treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime, right? In the future, if you want to live a bit more peacefully, it's best to kill this kid. In that case, it's best to kill this brat as soon as possible. Otherwise, once he spills the beans, there will be endless troubles in the future. After the ghostly thing reminded him, it went silent. Lin Yi smiled calmly. Even if that ghost hadn't warned him, he had already been planning on doing this. After all, if too many people knew about a supreme treasure like the Star Inkstone, that's not a good thing. In the blink of an eye that he had used his consciousness to communicate with the ghostly thing, Wuxia had already awoken from his greedy frenzy. After all, this guy was no ordinary person. With his mental fortitude, even if he could not be as calm as Lin Yi, he would definitely not indulge for too long, and he would definitely not be unable to pull himself out. All right. Now that you know what you want to know, you can give me the top-grade Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill. Wuxia stared coldly at Lin Yi. However, Lin Yi smiled at him. Sorry, I didn't intend to give it to you. I lied to you. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and put away the top-grade Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill in his hand. Coupled with the mocking expression on his face, even someone as shrewd as Wuxia was completely enraged. One Buddha was born. 2 Buddhas ascended to the heavens. So you're saying that you're prepared to have a taste of living a life worse than death? I'll satisfy you. As he spoke, a savage expression flashed across Wuxia's face, followed by killing intent. He was so easily angered? Lin Yi couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. If the opponent was someone like Meng Tong, no matter how strong he was, he wouldn't need to worry too much. He wouldn't even need to play any psychological games and think of a way to anger the opponent and make him reveal his weakness. But this guy in front of him, he didn't dare to underestimate him at all. Not to mention the fact that the opponent was stronger than him on the surface, the craftiness and cautiousness he had displayed before made him even more difficult to deal with. Facing such a strong opponent, it wasn't easy to find the opponent's weakness. Don't forget how shallow this guy had pretended to be at the Hong Merchant Guild. Then now, had he really been angered by him? Or was he just beating him at his own game, seizing the opportunity to numb him? Lin Yi wasn't sure. He could only go all out. Even if he had all kinds of powerful trump cards, the opponent was still a strong middle stage foundational stage expert. If he let his guard down even a little, What awaited him next could very well be eternal damnation. Facing Yuxia's rapid approach, Lin Yi didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced and faced him head-on. Using his full strength, his current speed was even faster than the opponent's. Yuxia was instantly shocked. Any sane peak early-stage foundational stage expert would definitely not have this kind of reaction when facing a middle-stage foundational stage expert like him, right? Could it be that this guy thought he could face him head-on? He really didn't know his own limits. He was just a grassroots loose cultivator. Where did this idiot get his courage from? Where did his boldness come from? With a sinister laugh, Yuxia immediately used his fingers as a sword. A formless and sharp sword aura immediately extended from the tip of his fingers. It was like a peerless sword showing its edge for the first time. Whether it was the sand, rocks, grass or trees, they all made a rustling sound. Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. Only now did he understand that the sword aura that the opponent had emitted earlier wasn't because of some divine weapon, but purely because of his own powerful strength. This opponent was really not to be underestimated. The sword aura that ambushed him earlier was already very strong, but now that the opponent's fingertip was ready to attack, it didn't hide its power like before, and its lethality would only be stronger. But even so, Lin Yi still didn't have any intention of retreating. The two of them used their movement techniques with all their might, and the original distance of 10 feet between them was instantly reduced to an extremely short distance. After a breath, there was only a distance of 10 feet between the two of them. Yuxia seemed to have seen through Lin Yi's intention, and the sword aura that had already gathered at the tip of his fingers didn't attack. He actually used it as a physical weapon, directly stabbing towards Lin Yi's face. And just as the sword aura was about to enter his body, and it seemed that he couldn't avoid it, Lin Yi's body twisted, and at the last moment, he forcefully changed his direction and brushed past the sword aura. Humph, I knew you would play this trick. What a small trick, showing off in front of an expert. Yuxia laughed coldly, and the sword aura between his fingers shifted as he prepared. If he hadn't seen through Lin Yi's intention of feigning an attack but actually taking the opportunity to escape, he would have released this sword aura a long time ago. Chapter 3746. In this way, Yuxia's sword chi would be wasted, and he would even reveal an opening to receive the attack. After all, if he wanted to condense the next sword chi, he would need some time. This might not be a big flaw normally, but in a close combat like this where hands and feet were connected, this was definitely a fatal flaw. But now, he saw through Lin Yi's intentions, and all of this didn't exist anymore. The initiative was completely in his hands, and Lin Yi was just a fish on the chopping board that could be executed at any time. Although you're a little clever, unfortunately, you met me. You're destined not to live past today. Yuxia sneered as he aimed at Lin Yi's panicking back and calculated the direction in which Lin Yi would escape. The sword chi at the tip of his finger instantly whistled as it poured out. Everywhere it passed, jade and stone cracked, and no one could stop it. 23rd move of the deadly continuous sword. Bang! The earth shook and the mountains shook. The powerful sword chi directly split the forest in front of him in half with monstrous power. However, at this moment, Yuxia's face didn't have the slightest hint of complacency. Instead, it was livid, and there was even a hint of panic. There was no other reason. He had actually failed with this sword strike that he was determined to win. In the instant he attacked, he was less than 3 m away from Lin Yi. Moreover, because he had accurately calculated Lin Yi's intentions, he was already prepared. In theory, there was no possibility of him failing. But the reality was that he had failed. Although this monstrous and powerful sword chi destroyed half the forest, it didn't even touch the corner of Lin Yi's clothes. Faced with such an outcome, even a scheming person like Yuxia couldn't help but become angry out of humiliation. The reason why he had failed was actually very simple. Lin Yi's attempt to feign an attack and escape was intentionally revealed by him to Lin Yi. According to his original words, it was, "Sorry, I lied to you. From the beginning to the end." This was a scam, a classic psychological game. Although Lin Yi had all kinds of powerful trump cards and was not afraid of his opponent, he was not stupid enough to fight him head-on. At the end of the day, he was only an expert at the peak of the early stage of foundation establishment. He was one level lower than his opponent. The possibility of suffering a loss was obviously higher. No matter how strong or how confident the weakling was on the surface, if he chose to fight head-on with his opponent, it would always be the worst option. The best option would be to fight him head-on. It was always a psychological attack, trying to lure the opponent into revealing a flaw, and then instantly revealing a powerful trump card, killing the enemy in one strike. Although back in the secular world, Lin Yi could often crush his opponent's head on even when he challenged those of a higher level, those could only be considered paper tigers. They had the level but not the strength. If he really encountered such a high-level enemy, it would obviously not be so simple and direct. How many disciples from the 3 pavilions of the North Island were mediocre? Especially the Soaring Sky Pavilion, they were all powerful existences. The psychological game was just a greeting, and the battle had just begun. At that moment, Lin Yi just pretended to move. If it was someone like Meng Tong, who had a slow reaction, this fake move could not fool him at all. Because he could not react at all, let alone perceive the intention that Lin Yi deliberately revealed. But facing Wuxia at the moment, because his reaction was too fast and his mind was too shrewd, he had long thought that he had grasped Lin Yi's intention, so he fell into Lin Yi's trap. To put it bluntly, this was a psychological game. In fact, it was a psychological trap that Lin Yi had specially set for smart people like Wuxia. It might not work on other ordinary people, but it was definitely tried and tested for smart people like him who were confident that they could grasp everything. After understanding this in an instant, Wuxia's face suddenly became extremely ugly. At this moment, there was only a distance between him and Lin Yi. Originally, he was relying on his strength to bully the weak. This distance was the perfect opportunity to kill Lin Yi, and Lin Yi had no chance to escape. However, just because he fell into Lin Yi's carefully designed psychological trap, the situation suddenly took a turn for the worse. At this moment, the one who really had the upper hand was Lin Yi, the weakling. After the killing move that he was determined to kill failed, his move was old, and he did not have the strength to continue. Wuxia was a master in the middle stage of the Foundation establishment realm, but in a short moment, he revealed a fatal flaw in front of the weakling Lin Yi. Of course, Lin Yi would not miss this carefully designed opportunity. He immediately clenched his palm into a fist, taking advantage of Wuxia's weakness, and directly punched out. The fiery fist intent immediately surged out, and instantly bombarded the opponent's chest without any hindrance. 23rd Style of Frenzy Fist. Humph! You spent so much effort to make me fall into your trap, but it's only this much. After receiving this punch, Wuxia acted as if nothing had happened. However, before he finished speaking, his body shook violently. Whoosh! The clothes on his chest were instantly burned to ashes, and even the flesh that was exposed inside was scorched black. It was a shocking sight. What was even more shocking was that the fiery fist intent of the frenzy fist did not dissipate just like that. At this moment, it was like a raging fire attached to the opponent's body, continuously burning the opponent's body. Even though Wuxia used his powerful true energy to suppress it and prevent it from continuing to spread, the areas that were already hit were still burning with pain. This was a new change that Lin Yi had just mastered after practicing the 23rd style of the Frenzy Fist. In the previous 22 styles, the Frenzy Fist had always walked the path of extreme yang and extreme hardness. Although this could increase its destructive power, there was not much room for change. It lacked a portion of spiritual energy, and once its destructive power was not effective, it was very easy to fall into a passive state in a high-level battle. However, the fiery fist intent of these 23 styles, aside from being fierce and overbearing, also gave rise to an unending after effect. It was because of this after effect that after Wuxia was hit, he actually had an additional burning effect. Because of this, the practicality of the frenzy fist greatly increased. When facing a high-level opponent, even if its destructive power could not cause fatal damage to the opponent, its subsequent burning effect was still very useful. That was because a burn meant excruciating pain, and under the excruciating pain, even the most intelligent person would often lose their usual rationality. Chapter 3747. Seeing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but shake his head slightly in disappointment. 23 forms of the frenzy fist, such a close and defenseless attack on the chest. If the opponent was a peak early-stage Foundation establishment expert of the same level, just this attack alone would have injured him quite severely. But for Wuxia, this kind of injury could only be considered a flesh wound at most. It was already good enough that he felt intense pain. On the other side, Lin Yi was still disappointed, but at this moment, Wuxia was already tormented by the intense pain to the point of anger. What kind of freaking strange martial technique was this? Although the power wasn't that great, the burning after effects were really annoying. Even using true qi could only suppress it, and couldn't remove it in a short amount of time. Very good. You're going through all this trouble just to anger me, right? Then I'll tell you now, you've succeeded. Wuxia stared coldly at Lin Yi, who immediately retreated after throwing a punch. He gritted his teeth and said, "But unfortunately, this isn't good news for you, because I don't plan on caring about whatever supreme-grade Foundation establishment barrier-breaking pill you have anymore. I'm going to tear you into 1,000 pieces now." After saying this, Wuxia forcefully endured the intense pain coming from his chest and took a step forward. The color of the surrounding forest instantly changed. Everything that could move and couldn't move seemed to have the momentum of an incoming storm. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The commotion was far more violent than when he was condensing the 23 forms of the fatal consecutive sword. Was this guy planning on using his ultimate killing move? Lin Yi's heart tightened, and he activated the art of dragon mastery to quickly replenish the true qi he had used up in the 23 forms of the frenzy fist. He held his breath and focused his mind, silently waiting for the opponent's next attack. If they were of the same level, perhaps Lin Yi would have chosen to make the first move. After all, sitting and waiting for death had never been his style. But right now, he was the weaker one on the surface. In order to make good use of this advantage, he had to choose to temporarily endure. Only after finding 100% chance of success would the trump card's killing move truly have the effect of a decisive blow. If he used it to fight against the opponent's powerful martial technique for no reason, he would only expose his trump card in advance. Apart from that, it was meaningless. Seeing Lin Yi's nervous posture as if he was facing a great enemy, Wuxia gathered an unprecedentedly powerful aura as he sneered disdainfully, "Weaklings are weaklings. So what if they rack their brains to get the upper hand? In the face of an absolute gap in strength, no matter how many schemes and plots you have, they are just a joke. Today, I will let you experience what it means to not provoke a strong person before you die." If only his body didn't have this incessant burning pain. Perhaps he would still try to scheme against Lin Yi, but now, he clearly did not have the patience to do so. At the end of the day, what truly determined the outcome of a battle was still strength. Once one possessed sufficient strength, all one had to do was crush his opponent to death. There was no need to waste too much effort. As his voice fell, Wuxia's figure once again shot towards Lin Yi like a cannonball. His speed was much faster than the speed he had displayed just now. In the blink of an eye, he had already arrived in front of Lin Yi. Lin Yi's heart jumped. This guy had indeed hidden his strength. If he hadn't used the 23rd form of the Frenzied Fire Fist, but had rashly used the 22nd form of the Frenzied Fire 8 Trigrams Palm, the strongest killing move. If he had used up all the vital energy in his body and this guy saw that he was exhausted, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Because with the speed he was displaying now, even though the opening just now was not small, if he had used his full strength, he still had a chance to avoid it. But if Lin Yi had just straightforwardly used the only killing move that could kill his opponent, then it would really be a big joke. It could be seen that after this guy had fallen into his psychological trap, he wasn't as panicked as he appeared. Instead, he had conveniently set up a trap for himself. If he had thought that he had grasped a fatal opening and didn't hold back, then he would already be a corpse on the ground. As expected, he was a dangerous and cunning guy. He was full of schemes. His figure flashed in front of Lin Yi. Wuxia raised the sword energy on his fingertip high. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he was going to cut Lin Yi from head to toe. With one sword, he would cut Lin Yi in half. In reality, if he really cut down like this, and Lin Yi didn't have time to dodge in advance, this was almost a foregone conclusion. Because this sword energy was even sharper and stronger than the previous one. Even if Lin Yi used the 22nd form of the Frenzied Fire 8 Trigrams Palm, he might not be able to match it. Unfortunately, how could Lin Yi just stand there stupidly and let him cut him? The sword energy was about to reach his head. Lin Yi instinctively wanted to dodge to the side. But before he could move, he instinctively felt a fatal premonition. At the same time, the jade pendant space was also giving off warnings. Wuxia's eyes flashed with disdain as he watched Lin Yi dodge to the side. As expected, in front of absolute strength, all schemes were useless. He'd just used his strongest move, and Lin Yi wouldn't be able to escape this at all. If he didn't dodge, he would die. If he dodged, he would die. This was his strongest move, the fatal 24 forms of the continuous sword. It was a terrifying move that could only be practiced after reaching the middle stage of the foundational level. The opponent was merely a grassroots solo cultivator at the peak of the foundational level. How could he be dodged so easily? The sword seemed to give the opponent a chance to dodge, but in reality, he didn't. Because the 24 forms of the fatal 24 forms of the continuous sword didn't end here. There was an even more fatal follow-up move waiting for him. As expected, the moment Lin Yi dodged to the right, he found that there was already another Wuxia on the right. The tip of the finger was also condensed with a powerful and sharp sword energy. This Wuxia had been waiting here for a long time. This wasn't the real body. It was just a temporary illusion created by the 24 forms of the fatal 24 forms of the continuous sword. However, although Wuxia was fake, the sword energy was real. Its power was exactly the same as the one on the tip of the finger of the real body. As long as he willed it, the second follow-up sword Qi and Shadow could appear within 2 feet of him at any time. In this way, no matter how the opponent dodged, he could only dodge the first sword Qi, but could never dodge the second one. This was the domineering power of the 24 styles of deadly consecutive swords. Die in peace. Wuxia smiled at the terrified Lin Yi. Because Lin Yi dodged, the sword energy in his real body's hand was completely split open. However, the one in the illusion's hand hit Lin Yi's back. Chapter 3748. However, the smile on Wuxia's face instantly froze. Looking at Lin Yi, who was still standing in front of him, he blurted out in disbelief, "How is this possible?" With the power of the 24 sword forms, even a mid-stage foundation establishment practitioner wouldn't be able to stand here, let alone a mere foundation establishment practitioner like Lin Yi, even if he wasn't dismembered by the sword energy. Lin Yi, on the other hand, was covered in blood. He replied with a faint smile, "I'm really sorry. I already expected your second sword Qi. The reason why I deliberately let you hit me was just to trick you again. I'm a humorous person. I'm really sorry to disappoint you." Before he finished speaking, Lin Yi didn't wait for his opponent to react. He directly activated the true Qi that he had been accumulating for a long time and hit his opponent's chest with his palm. With the enhancement of the essence necklace, the 22 forms of the Mad Fire 8 trigrams palm. At this moment, Wuxia had just used the 24 forms of the deadly continuous sword and consumed a large amount of true Qi. He was completely in a state of exhaustion and was completely defenseless against Lin Yi's palm. A middle-stage foundation establishment realm master was directly hit by Lin Yi's palm and flew 10 feet away. His chest made a cracking sound, and not only did it cave in, blood kept spurting out of his mouth in a bloody arc. He couldn't even perform the most basic quick recovery movement. He smashed onto the ground and didn't know if he was dead or alive. In front of absolute power, all schemes are just a joke. That's true. I'll take this as an early praise from you. Lin Yi looked at Wuxia, who didn't know if he was dead or alive. He sucked in a cold breath and struggled to straighten his body. He gritted his teeth and raised his hand to look at his bloody left armpit. Fortunately, although the injury wasn't light, it wasn't too serious. It wouldn't be too troublesome to recover. The reason why the injury appeared on his left armpit was because Lin Yi had predicted his opponent's attack and prepared in advance. Originally, he could have tried to avoid the second sword and retreat. He had lost the opportunity to kill his opponent, and it would not be easy to find such an opportunity again. Therefore, he came up with this plan on the spur of the moment. He deliberately adjusted his body so that the second sword energy would pierce through his left armpit, giving others the false impression that the sword energy had pierced through his left arm. However, in fact, this injury was far from fatal to Lin Yi. After deceiving the other party's eyes, the next step would be simple. With the 22 styles of the Raging Fire 8 trigrams palm, the world fell silent. Originally, with Wuxia's cautiousness and cunning, no matter how much effort Lin Yi put in, it would be hard for him to find a chance to kill Wuxia. This was because if something went wrong, Wuxia would immediately react. Even if Lin Yi used a killing move, he might not be able to kill Wuxia. However, after being burned by the frenzied fire fist, he gave up on thinking and chose to use his strength to crush Lin Yi. This was the root of his tragedy. When both sides' true strength was about the same, psychological warfare was the key to deciding who would have the last laugh. After all, both sides' strength was about the same. What could one use to crush the other? Therefore, in this battle, when Wuxia gave up thinking, the winner had already been decided. Lin Yi let out a long breath. After calming his breathing, he walked towards Wuxia. Although today's battle was a psychological victory, it was not easy at all. As the saying goes, to get rid of evil, one must cut the weeds at the roots. Now that things had developed to this point, he naturally would not let the other live. If the other was already dead, then that would be for the best. But if he was not dead, then he had to take advantage of the fact that the other was heavily injured and unable to move to finish him off. Otherwise, if he found a chance to slip away, there would be no end of trouble. As he slowly approached the other, he paid attention to every movement on the other's body. However, when Lin Yi was less than 2 feet away from him, Wuxia was still lying on the ground, facing the yellow soil. There was no sign of life. It felt like he was completely dead. Not normal. Lin Yi was instantly alarmed. If it was a peak early-stage foundational cultivator, his frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm 22 moves could definitely kill him. But if it was used on a middle-stage foundational cultivator like Wuxia, it was a bit of a stretch. Even with the power of the profound chi necklace, the most it could do was seriously injure the other and bring him to the brink of death. It was unlikely to completely kill him. It definitely wouldn't be like this, where not a single sound came out. With the cunning that this fellow had displayed before, it was not impossible for him to feign death at this time, numb himself, and then wait for an opportunity to counterattack. In fact, it was highly possible. If it was someone else, they might want to get closer to confirm whether the other was dead or alive. But Lin Yi stopped 2 feet away. As he used the space in the jade to replenish his inner chi, he secretly circulated his chi to prepare the 21st move of the frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm. Although the power of the 21st move of the frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm couldn't be compared to the 22nd move, it was more than enough in this situation. Lin Yi had already made up his mind. It didn't matter if the guy was faking his death or not, he'd give him another slap first. Once he was done, the guy wouldn't be able to fake his death anymore even if he wanted to, because he'd be dead through and through, with no chance of survival. As expected, after sensing Lin Yi's intention, the already dead corpse on the ground finally couldn't hold back anymore. He suddenly rolled to the side to escape from Lin Yi's slap. At the same time, his hand sprinkled a silver-gray powder. Lime? This was Lin Yi's first reaction. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. A middle-stage foundational cultivator couldn't win in a fight, so he threw lime to escape. This kind of déjà vu of a street thug was a bit too funny, wasn't it? However, Lin Yi immediately realized that this throw of lime was unusual. Not only could it be used to block vision, but more importantly, it could also explode. Boom! The earth shook and the mountains shook. The explosion of this small throw of lime actually created a small mushroom cloud, which really shocked Lin Yi. If he hadn't gathered his chi in advance and prepared the 21st move of the frenzied fire 8 trigrams palm, he decisively used it to offset most of the frontal impact. Fortunately, he wasn't too close just now. Otherwise, if he was caught off guard, just this explosion alone would definitely cause him more injuries. In that case, it might even be possible for the opponent to find an opportunity to counterattack. This was simply a powerful artificially created dust explosion. Chapter 3749. Chase. This was the first thought that came to Lin Yi's mind. However, at this moment, the other party should have already escaped for a while, and it was difficult to find the right direction in such a short time. Just as Lin Yi was about to find a direction to try his luck, he heard footsteps coming from afar. His heart suddenly tightened. If the matter of him chasing Wuxia was seen by others, then this matter would be troublesome. After all, this guy was an inner court disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion. If Lin Yi dared to kill him in front of others, it was simply challenging the 3 great pavilions in public. Even if he was courting death, it would not be in such a way. Hearing the footsteps getting closer and closer, Lin Yi couldn't help but feel helpless. His current state was a little better than Wuxia's, but it wasn't that much better. Putting aside the fact that he wouldn't be able to continue the chase after being found, if it was someone with bad intentions and wanted to take advantage of him, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. To be safe, Lin Yi could only give up the idea of chasing and killing him. As he quickly left the scene, he sighed endlessly. This guy was really cunning and difficult to deal with. Even this couldn't kill him, and he actually ran away. Was this guy born in the year of the weasel? Moreover, this guy's trump card, other than the life-taking chainsaw that was split into 2, he actually still had this strange and powerful powder. He was really cunning and could not be underestimated. However, this time, such a great opportunity was run away. In the future, it would be very difficult to get rid of this person. After all, although he knew that the other party was an inner court disciple of Soaring Sky Pavilion, He did not even know who his name was. It would be very difficult to encounter such an opportunity where there was no one around. Plus, even if there was a chance like this in the future, Lin Yi wouldn't be able to play mind games like he did this time, given the cunning, caution, and strength Lin Yi had displayed. Unless he used an even stronger power to crush him, it would be almost impossible to play mind games like this time. Forget it, since he ran away, it can't be helped. It seems that when I use the 1,000 silk mask and the identity of Lin II in the future, I have to be more careful. Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. Fortunately, he was wearing the 1,000 silk mask today to hide his identity. Otherwise, if he were to become enemies with the other party with his real identity, he would not be able to live in peace in the future. He already had Su Lingchong and Meng Jueguang as his sworn enemies. If he were to add the cunning and cruel Wuxia to the mix, he would have to waste his time with this bunch of idiots every day in the welcoming pavilion if nothing unexpected happened. Then what was the point of concentrating on cultivation? Avoiding the eyes and ears of others on the way, Lin Yi smoothly returned to his cave in the welcoming pavilion. He immediately began to heal his wounds. Although he felt some regret that he hadn't been able to kill Wuxia, the fact that he had successfully bought the Star Inkstone today could already be considered a great success. It was a treasure that could help people perfectly break through to the gold core stage. If this matter were to spread out, it would be a powerful opportunity that everyone in the world would covet. Although Lin Yi wouldn't be able to use it for the time being, there would be a day in the future when the strongest gold core stage expert would step into the ranks of the top experts on Heaven Stage Island. Just thinking about this kind of thing was enough to make one's blood boil. What Lin Yi didn't know was that after the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, not far from the center of the dust explosion, under a thick layer of yellow soil, a half-dead, heavily wounded fellow crawled out with great difficulty. It was Wuxia. Although from beginning to end, Lin Yi had used psychological warfare to toy with his opponent, there was one thing that he had made a mistake. He had underestimated the power of his Wildfire 8 trigrams Palm 22 forms. Although the 22 forms couldn't directly kill a middle-stage foundation establishment expert, with a perfect opportunity just now, he had used almost all of his power. That palm had almost used 100% of its power. Even if Wuxia didn't die after being hit by that palm, he would be seriously injured. And then he had used the powder to release the dust explosion, causing him to be injured on top of his own injuries. It was impossible for him to escape very far in such a short period of time. Although Wuxia knew that as long as he ran to a place with people, Lin Yi wouldn't dare to chase after him no matter how bold he was, the problem was, he had followed Lin Yi for so long and purposely went to such a remote corner to launch a sneak attack. If he wanted to return to the main road with more people, he would have to escape at least 2 miles away. With his injuries, it was impossible for him to hide from Lin Yi's senses and run that far away, so he could only seek survival in this dangerous situation. He stayed where he was and used the opportunity of the dust explosion to bury himself deep in the soil. The only chance of survival was to bet that Lin Yi wouldn't stay here for too long. This was a truly ruthless move. Not to mention how long Lin Yi would stay. Doing this would force him into a dead end. It was impossible for a normal person to survive being buried deep in the soil. Although a middle-stage foundation establishment expert like him wouldn't be a problem, don't forget that he was currently in a state of near death from serious injuries. If he was buried for a little longer, he would suffocate to death like a normal person. Moreover, even if he didn't suffocate to death, he might not have the strength to struggle out of the soil. At that time he would still die. However, Wuxia didn't think that much and just did it. He was fighting for survival in the face of death. In the end, he was caught by this last chance of survival. Of course, this chance of survival was also due to luck. If someone hadn't passed by at that time, Lin Yi would definitely have stayed and searched carefully instead of letting him go so easily. It could only be said that heaven never bars one's way. Although Wuxia's idea of attacking Lin Yi was a mistake from beginning to end, his luck in the end wasn't bad. Even if he knocked into an iron plate and had his teeth broken, he was still able to keep his life. Huff, huff. Finally seeing the light of day again, Wuxia greedily gasped for air. Although the injuries on his body were so severe that he could die at any moment, with the life force of a middle-stage foundation establishment expert, if there was no external interference, as long as he didn't want to die, he still had a chance to survive. Heh, luckily I had a trump card. Otherwise, I really would have been caught off guard and killed by you today. Swaying, Wuxia forcefully propped himself up from the ground. However, he didn't leave. Instead, he looked around based on the route that Lin Yi had taken before. He weakly muttered to himself in confusion. In this direction, there's only the welcoming pavilion. Normal grassroots loose cultivators wouldn't go this way. Could it be that this guy is actually a newcomer to the welcoming pavilion? That's not very possible. Since when did the welcoming pavilion have a newcomer at the peak of the early stage foundation establishment? Or is this guy the manager of the welcoming pavilion? Chapter 3750. No matter what, he had to take revenge today, and he had to find a way to get that star ink stone. But if he wanted to do this, the most important thing was to recover from his injuries. Only after investigating this guy's background would it be convenient for him to act. Thinking of this, Wuxia's stumbling footsteps suddenly paused, a sinister look flashing in his eyes. But before that, he could instigate others to do some things for him. At least he could find a way to investigate this guy's background, and that cheap master of his just happened to be an excellent candidate. Leaving aside the fact that Wuxia was plotting revenge on Lin Yi, after Lin Yi obtained the star inkstone, he very quickly returned to the normal rhythm of welcoming newcomers. During the day, he still punctually went to the Jade Spirit Hall to mine, and at night, he still meditated and cultivated in his cave residence. Occasionally, he would exchange his experiences with his bitter senior brother and the others, chatting about the latest happenings on Step Island. Apart from that, Lin Yi didn't care about Wuxia's matters in the slightest. After all, the one who had a grudge with Wuxia was Lin's second, not him, Lin Yi. Because during this period of time, apart from cultivating and stabilizing his strength, the only thing he needed to deal with was the newcomer assessment in the next segment of Welcoming Pavilion. Lin Yi didn't need to use the identity of Lin's second for anything, so he naturally didn't need to worry about it. After all, as long as Lin's second didn't appear, then even if Wuxia found 1,000 or 800 super experts to seek revenge, it would be useless. Because no matter how many people they had, it was impossible to find this non-existent Lin's second. Since they couldn't find Lin's second, then the so-called revenge was naturally out of the question. After several days of peace, the third segment of the newcomer assessment was finally about to begin. At this time, the newcomers who had been injured in the resistance test had basically recovered, and everyone's points were announced on the public list. On the side of Blue Cloud Pavilion, Lin Yi had a strong performance with 2 consecutive divine full marks. He had a total of 105 points in the first 2 segments, firmly occupying the top spot. His advantage was so great that no one could shake it. Meng Tong, who was in second place, had a total of 72 points. Lin Yi had pulled away from him by 33 points. Anyone with a discerning eye could already tell that as long as Lin Yi performed normally in the assessment segment, he would not make any fatal mistakes. Even if he couldn't achieve a godly full score like the previous 2 rounds, he had almost locked in first place in Blue Cloud Pavilion in advance. He was the real number 1 seed of Blue Cloud Pavilion. After Meng Tong, Xiao Ran ranked 3rd with 43 points, Qiao Hongkai ranked 4th with 42 points, and Li Zhengming ranked 4th with 41 points. He was ranked 5th. The rest of the Clear Cloud Pavilion's newcomers were clearly separated from the previous 5. Their points were all below 30 points, and the last one at the bottom only had a pitiful 11 points. Although the rookie assessment had only completed 2 segments, there was already a clear gap between the rookies. Even in the assessment segment, some rookies might be good or bad at the assessment segment, so their points would inevitably fluctuate. But overall, it was almost impossible for the rookies at the back to pose a threat to the ones at the front. Even if the freak Lin Yi and Meng Tong, who was supported by Meng Jueguang, just Xiao Ran, Qiao Hongkai, and Li Zhengming had each pulled away from them by more than 12 points. Although a difference of 12 points did not seem too exaggerated, these people were not freaks like Lin Yi, who could easily get a godly full score. Even if they could occasionally surpass the 3 in a few segments, their overall strength was obvious. It would be good enough if they could maintain the point gap and not continue to widen. It was not realistic for them to catch up. Otherwise, they would not have only obtained such a pitiful number of points after 2 segments. Meng Jueguang's eyes twitched as he looked at the ranking on the public list. He was the most powerful senior in charge of all the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies. He was even going to aspire for the throne of the 3rd Pavilion Master in the future. He was not someone a marginal figure like senior brother Ku Bai could be compared to. That was the truth. Other than Lin Yi and the other 2 who did not have eyes, the other rookies had all pledged their allegiance to him. Senior brother Ku Bai could not compete with him. However, at this moment, even Meng Jueguang, who had always been thick-skinned, couldn't help but blush in embarrassment at this embarrassing ranking. He had a total of 12 Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies under him. Among the top 5 of the leading group, only 2 of them occupied the top 2 spots. One was Meng Tong in 2nd place, and the other was Li Zhangming in 5th place. On the other hand, the lonely senior brother's 3 underlings were all on the list, and one of them was Lin Yi, the one they saw as a thorn in their side, the one they had plotted against, was unquestionably number 1, and no one could shake his position. With such a sharp contrast, it was really embarrassing to the point of hurting one's balls. This was because Meng Jueguang did not know about Li Zhangming. If he knew that Li Zhangming had betrayed Lin Yi and become a spy, he would really vomit blood. As the senior brother in charge of the Blue Cloud Pavilion rookies, he could only occupy one of the top 5 rookies. How the fuck could he face others? Meng Jueguang even subconsciously felt that the rookies under him had been looking at him strangely for the past few days. In the long run, when these rookies gradually began to believe that he could not bring them any benefits, or that he could not even compare to their bitter opponents, it would be troublesome. Once he lost his prestige in front of these rookies, even if he, Meng Jueguang, was able to sit in the position of 3rd Pavilion Master, he would only be a commander without an army. His situation was not much better than Liu Bianren, who was about to be kicked away. No, I have to quickly think of a way to curb this development. Previously, because he had been thinking of ways to kill Lin Yi, Meng Jueguang almost did not spend much effort in this aspect. But now that he was aware of this huge potential crisis, he naturally had to think of a way to solve it. Because his plan to kill Lin Yi failed twice, especially in the resistance assessment, he racked his brains to plan such a flawless fatal trap, but Lin Yi escaped unscathed. Therefore, before they understood Lin Yi's background, whether it was Su Lingchong, young Master Su, or Meng Jueguang himself, they did not have the intention to touch Lin Yi for the time being. Chapter 3751. Even if he didn't plan to kill them, he had to at least come up with a plan to suppress their points for the next part of the exam. After all, the current point ranking was too much of an eyesore. Looking at Lin Yi and the others chatting casually, Meng Jueguang pinched his chin and smiled coldly. I'll let you guys be happy for a while. I didn't have time to deal with you guys before, so I let you guys take advantage of the loophole. Now, you guys will be crying. Putting aside the troublesome Lin Yi, if it was just Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, these 2 newbies, Meng Jueguang didn't even care about them. In his eyes, it was a piece of cake to deal with these 2. According to the usual practice, after all the newbies from the 3 pavilions had gathered, the head of the pavilion, Hu Yunfeng, would appear and announce the rules of the next part of the exam. Just like the first pressure resistance exam, the location of the 3rd part of the exam wasn't the welcome pavilion, but the Hall of Elixirs. But more accurately speaking, the 3rd part wasn't in the Hall of Elixirs. The head of the pavilion, Hu Yunfeng, brought all the newbies to the Hall of Elixirs as a formality, allowing everyone to pick some elixir seeds and bring them back to cultivate. As everyone knew, any practitioner in the world of practitioners had to deal with all sorts of elixirs. The only difference was how many elixirs they had. Some people had a good background and could eat all sorts of elixirs like food. Some people didn't, and could only save up resources, exchanging them for elixirs at critical moments. Some people were like Lin Yi, an elixir refiner, and could make all sorts of elixirs by themselves. In short, no matter what kind of person they were, they would need all sorts of elixirs in their long life of practicing. Otherwise, in this day and age where the qi was getting thinner and thinner, it was unrealistic to rely on one's own hard work to break through. Even if they succeeded, that was only for the extremely talented few. 99% of the people couldn't do without elixirs. But in order to make elixirs, other than a specialized elixir refiner, the most important thing was all sorts of common and uncommon elixirs. If they didn't have all sorts of elixirs as elixirs, even an elixir god like Zhang Liju wouldn't be able to do it. However, any spiritual herb was a heavenly treasure. Even the most common and low-grade spiritual herb was only relative to other spiritual herbs. Compared to other plants, it was still an extremely rare and precious item. It was impossible to collect a large amount of them. Not to mention other rare items like the heart-devouring exquisite grass. Naturally, the artificial method of planting spirit herbs came into being. However, although spiritual medicine was also a plant, it had harsh requirements for the environment it grew in. It was far more difficult to compare with ordinary plants and flowers. Even if there were cultivators who spent a lot of effort to take care of it, its survival rate would always remain at an extremely low level. Moreover, its growth cycle was generally very long. Often, after working hard for dozens of years, the slightest carelessness would cause them to wither and die, and all their efforts would go down the drain. However, after tens of thousands of years of experience, the current cultivation world of Heavenly Island had concluded a set of very mature cultivation methods for spiritual herbs. Not only was the survival rate much higher than before, but with the addition of artificial ripening methods, even the growth cycle was greatly shortened. Therefore, many common spiritual herbs could be cultivated on a large scale to ensure their supply. Of course, this was only limited to some common spiritual herbs. Most of the special spiritual herbs were extremely rare, and there was no experience in cultivation. Therefore, their survival rate was still at an extremely low level. Otherwise, if they could be cultivated on a large scale, they would have been widely planted. They would not be called rare spiritual herbs. Looking at the entire North Island of Heavenly Island, the most authoritative place in the cultivation of spiritual herbs was naturally the Alchemy Hall. This time, Hu Yunfeng brought the newcomers from the 3 pavilions here to let them collect the seeds of various spiritual herbs. Then, they would be brought back to their respective caves for cultivation. This was the 3rd round of the newcomer assessment, the spiritual herb trial. Like the law enforcement hall, the Alchemy Hall was the most famous independent department besides the 3 pavilions on the North Island. It was one of the few independent departments that could be heard by everyone. Compared to the cold but extremely intimidating law enforcement hall, the Alchemy Hall was built against the mountain and welcomed everyone. Whether it was the architectural layout or the flow of people, it was obviously much more friendly and easygoing than the law enforcement hall. At least, it would not make people feel uncomfortable. After all, strictly speaking, other than being the independent department of the 3 pavilions and responsible for the supply of elixirs to the 3 pavilions, the Alchemy Hall was also a large business organization similar to the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Don't forget, Senior Brother Ku Bai was still wondering if he should gather 200 pieces of spiritual jade and come to the Alchemist Hall to help him refine the Foundation Establishment barrier-breaking pill. Every year, just by collecting fees for refining elixirs for others, the Alchemy Hall could earn an astronomical amount of wealth. In addition, the Alchemy Hall also cooperated with large businesses like the Hong Chamber of Commerce to sell all kinds of elixirs in bulk. This was another astronomical amount of wealth. Adding the two together, the Alchemy Hall was definitely one of the wealthiest departments of the 3 pavilions. Even the Spirit Jade Hall, which was responsible for mining spiritual jade, was at most on par with it. It was also because of such a huge amount of wealth that the Alchemy Hall could support the collection of all kinds of rare spiritual herbs and the recruitment of many alchemists. Otherwise, if it could not do these two things, the Alchemy Hall would only exist in name. Under Hu Yunfeng's lead, the group of newcomers from the 3 pavilions followed the mountain's terrain and climbed up the stairs. After passing through layers of antique buildings, what appeared in front of the newcomers was a stretch of enchanting lush greenery. Even from hundreds of feet away, they could smell the refreshing fragrance of spiritual herbs. This was the most important source of spiritual herbs for the Alchemy Hall, the spirit medicine nursery that it had organized and developed. It covered an area of tens of acres and expended a large amount of manpower and resources. The Alchemy Hall had cultivated over 100 types of spiritual herbs here. In order to ensure an adequate supply of spiritual energy, there were even piles of high-grade spiritual jade full of spiritual energy on the ground. In a natural environment, there was no need to deliberately do so for normal spiritual herbs to grow. The spirit medicine nursery clearly did so to increase its output. If it was left to grow naturally, there would not be many spiritual herbs growing in this small area of tens of acres. As far as the eye could see, not only were there all kinds of priceless spiritual herbs, there were also spiritual jade everywhere. It was a soul-stirring sight. The newcomers from the 3 pavilions, who had never seen such a scene, could not help but swallow their saliva in unison. Chapter 3752. After seeing this scene, even Lin Yi felt a wave of admiration. In a place like this, spirit jades were even more worthless than in Spirit Jade Hall. After all, even though the Spirit Jade Hall produced spirit jades, they still treated them as if they were spirit jades. Every place was heavily guarded. However, in the spirit medicine nursery, spirit jades were tossed around like stones. Moreover, it seemed that the supervision wasn't strict. They didn't treat these spirit jades as treasures at all. The only purpose of their existence was to release spirit qi to serve these spirit herbs. That was all. But other than being surprised, Lin Yi didn't have any greedy thoughts. Although with his qualifications, as long as he had the chance to come here, stealing some spirit jade would be a piece of cake, but doing this kind of thing too often would cause problems. If Lin Yi wanted to earn a large amount of spirit jade in a short period of time, It was obvious that concocting elixirs would be faster. He could just concoct an ultimate-level foundation-breaking pill, and he would be able to earn thousands of spirit jade in one go. It was much more reliable than this kind of small-scale stealing. Of course, if he really wanted to sell elixirs, there was still some risk in using Lin Er's identity. If it wasn't necessary, the cautious Lin Yi wouldn't do this. And even with Lin Er's hidden identity, he couldn't sell large amounts of elixirs so frequently. He would definitely be targeted by people with ulterior motives, and it wouldn't be worth it. What Lin Yi needed to do was to raise his level, practice, and fight for a chance to go to Middle Island and meet Zhang Liju as soon as possible. After the newcomers waited for a while, the manager of the Spirit Herb Nursery finally arrived. He was a middle-aged man with extremely gentle lines, and his movements made this gentleness even more obvious. In the words of the common world, this kind of gentleman was actually a sissy. What made Lin Yi slightly surprised was that he didn't see Su Lingchong's figure this time, like in the previous 2 rounds. In the previous 2 rounds, this young master had personally come to supervise every round in order to kill him. It seemed that it was indeed like what Li Zhangming had said. Su Lingchong, Meng Jueguang, and the others had temporarily given up on the idea of directly dealing with him. Instead, they retreated in order to advance. They were prepared to figure out his strength first before killing him. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Hu Yunfeng, the Spirit Medicine Nursery's chief steward immediately ordered someone to bring a box over. Using a voice so gentle that it gave people goosebumps, he began to explain the specific rules of the assessment to the rookies. However, although Sissy's voice made people's scalps tingle, there was something good about it. It was very detailed, allowing the rookies to understand it thoroughly. It wouldn't be too blurry. Newcomers, there are 40 types of common or uncommon elixir seeds in this box. Oh, I'm sorry. The seeds are still in the breeding room. These are just labels for you to pick from. According to the rules of the newcomer assessment, each of you will need to randomly pick at least 10 types of spiritual herb seeds, 1 for each type. If you're willing, you can even take all 40 of them. At the same time, I'll give each of you a seed cultivation vessel for you to bring back to plant and cultivate. When planting and cultivating elixir seeds, other than having an environment that is compatible with their habits, there are 2 key factors that determine whether they can successfully grow. One is to ensure sufficient spiritual energy, which is the most basic requirement for their survival. 2 is to infuse vital energy at a fixed time every day to accelerate their ripening. Not only can this make up for the lack of spiritual energy, it can also greatly shorten their growth cycle. Otherwise, even if you endure for a few years, you might not be able to see them germinate. Generally speaking, if everything goes well, they'll be able to grow seedlings and survive in 15 to 20 days. As for how to infuse vital energy into the elixir seeds, I'll look for the senior brother in charge of this in the Spirit Medicine Nursery to demonstrate and explain to you. A Heavenly Dao expert was different from the previous Heaven rank experts. Above the Heavenly Dao. Above the Heavenly Dao, one could release vital energy. This was also the reason why Lin Yi could release vital energy from other acupoints. If he could do it, so could others. It just depended on whether everyone was willing to do it. Lin Yi might be able to recover in an instant, but if others wasted their physical strength and vital energy, they might need a few days to recover. Furthermore, if they overdraft their physical strength and vital energy, they might even drop a level. So when they heard that they still had to infuse vital energy, most of the newcomers felt their hearts ache. What you have to pay attention to is that once you use your vital energy to accelerate the ripening of the elixir seeds until they germinate and completely survive, you have to ensure an adequate supply of vital energy every day. Otherwise, because the growth mechanism has been artificially altered, it'll be like a lack of spiritual energy and will quickly wither and die. Of course, the survival rate of elixir seeds isn't considered high. Dying is a very normal thing. In fact, even the disciples of the pill hall can't guarantee a 100% survival rate. For newcomers like you, being able to successfully cultivate 5 seedlings out of 10 elixir seeds is already considered a relatively good result. Your points for this round of assessment will be calculated based on the number of elixir seeds that survive. Within the assessment period of 3 months, as long as you successfully cultivate a stock of elixir seedling, you will be able to obtain 3 points. Failing to cultivate won't deduct any points. But don't think that you can choose as many elixir seeds as you like. Because before that, every time you take away an elixir seed, 1 point will be deducted first. In other words, if you take away all 40 elixir seeds now, 40 points will be deducted first. If you can't cultivate more than 14 elixir seedlings in the next 3 months, not only will you not be able to obtain any points in this round of assessment, you will even have the points that you painstakingly earned in the previous 2 rounds deducted instead. However, if you have the ability to cultivate all 40 elixir seedlings, you will be able to directly obtain 120 points. Even if the previous 40 points are deducted, you will still be able to earn a net profit of 80 points. Isn't that very tempting? Unfortunately, that's impossible. Even the best elixir planter in our spirit medicine nursery can't cultivate all 40 elixir seeds in 3 months. So, I advise you to be more realistic and act within your means. Otherwise, if your points are deducted, it won't be worth it. Then we can start drawing lots to choose our seeds. Newcomers, do your best. Chapter 3753. The newcomers had been informed beforehand that the 3rd round of the trial of spiritual herbs would take up to 3 months, so the 4th round would begin in 3 days. The 2 rounds would be held at the same time, so it was very likely that the newcomers would be exhausted. If they were hot-headed and chose too many seeds, then they would not be able to guarantee a daily supply of vital energy. It was very likely that the tragedy of having their points deducted would occur, just as the sissy had said. Therefore, even the confident newcomers from the Soaring Sky Pavilion were extremely cautious. On average, they only chose around 10 spiritual herb seeds, and the most of them did not exceed 20. Even Kong Ming Ming, the popular candidate who was born an alchemist, only chose 20 seeds despite having such a unique advantage. After the Soaring Sky Pavilion, the old men from the Mysterious Pavilion, who were even more experienced, naturally would not make any stupid choices. On average, they chose between 10 and 20 seeds. As for the newcomers from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, they were the weakest and the most lacking in confidence. On average, they only chose the minimum of 10 spiritual herb seeds. If not for the rules, they would have chosen even less. Although people like Xiao Ran might not lose to the newcomers from the other 2 pavilions in terms of strength, it should not be forgotten that cultivating spiritual herb seeds not only required a large amount of vital energy, but also a large amount of spiritual energy. If the cave abode did not have enough spiritual energy, it would be useless no matter how rich one's vital energy was. The spiritual herb seeds would still wither and die. As for Xiao Ran's second cave abode at the foot of the mountain, although it was considered not bad among the newcomers from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, it could not be compared to the caves of the newcomers from the other 2 pavilions. Even the worst cave abode had a higher concentration of spiritual energy than his second cave abode at the foot of the mountain. Under such circumstances, choosing only 10 spiritual herb seeds was clearly a wise move. This was because with the poor conditions of the newcomers from the Blue Cloud Pavilion, it was very likely that they would not even be able to cultivate these 10 spiritual herb seeds. If they chose too many, wouldn't they be digging their own graves? Rather than foolishly daydreaming and fantasizing about how many points they could obtain in this round, it was better to think about how they could avoid having their points deducted. This was more realistic and wise. While the other newcomers were lining up to draw seeds, Lin Yi was at the end of the line, silently observing the 40 spiritual herb seeds provided by the Spirit Medicine Nursery. One of them made his eyes light up. Heart-devouring exquisite grass. Among the 40 spiritual herb seeds, there was actually a heart-devouring exquisite grass. Even though the sissy manager had said so earlier. He'd already said that there were some common ones and some uncommon ones among the 40 seeds, but he didn't dare imagine that there would be a seed of the heart-devouring exquisite grass among them. After all, in terms of rarity, the value and rarity of the heart-devouring exquisite grass was definitely much higher than other ordinary spiritual medicine seeds. To Lin Yi, it was like a pie that had fallen from heaven. Lin Yi's heart heated up. He'd just reached Foundation Establishment early phase peak not too long ago, but he was planning ahead. He only needed a bit more time to stabilize his strength, and he'd be ready to break through to Foundation Establishment mid-phase. To Foundation Established, the Foundation Establishment pill. The heart-devouring exquisite grass was the key to obtaining the heart-devouring exquisite grass. Last time, he'd gone through a lot of trouble on the outskirts of the back mountain, risking the fatal danger of being hunted by the golden-eyed eagles, and finally managed to get one from the cliff. He knew that if he wanted to get another one, he'd have to rack his brain to think of a way. Not to mention whether he could find another in the back mountain. Even if there was one, he would not be able to enter with his current identity. After all, the back mountain was protected by layers of restrictions. Without the permission of the back mountain hall, nobody could enter the back mountain as they pleased. Lin Yi, the newcomer of the Blue Cloud Pavilion, was no exception.
Who would have thought that the precious item that he might not be able to obtain even after racking his brains would actually deliver itself to him during the assessment mission?
However, the heart-devouring exquisite grass was indeed among the 40 spiritual herb seeds. It would not be easy for Lin Yi to obtain it. His only right was to report the number of seeds and draw the corresponding number from the box. In other words, unless Lin Yi reported a total of 40 spiritual herb seeds, he would not be able to obtain it.
Otherwise, he might miss the opportunity to obtain the heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds that could only be discovered by luck.
However, in a situation where all the other newcomers only reported 20 seeds, if he reported 40 seeds, unless he was a publicly acknowledged idiot, he would definitely be suspected. As for Lin Yi, although he had always been a maverick from his various performances, especially after consecutively obtaining 2 god-level full marks, in the eyes of others, he was not an idiot at all. Seeing that the newcomers in front of him were about to finish drawing their seeds and it would soon be his turn, Lin Yi could not help but frown as he felt a headache coming on. In front of him was a heaven-sent opportunity to obtain the heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds. He definitely did not want to miss it. After all, if he missed it, it would be extremely difficult to obtain the heart-devouring exquisite grass in the future. Even if he racked his brains to sneak into the back mountain, he might not be able to successfully find the heart-devouring exquisite grass. If it really did not work, he could only shock the world and choose all 40 spiritual herb seeds. Lin Yi secretly clenched his teeth. The heart-devouring exquisite grass was the key to refining the foundation building pill, and the foundation building pill was directly related to whether or not his strength could increase rapidly. With this, he would be able to deal with all kinds of unpredictable dangers in the future. In comparison, even if he was suspected, he could only go all out and not care so much. When the time came, he would just use his identity as a pill master to brush them off. Even if these people suspected him, they should not be able to link it to the foundation building pill. The risk was not too big, and it was still better than missing the opportunity to obtain the heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds. When everyone in front of him had finished drawing their seeds, it was Lin Yi's turn. He was already the last one. Meng Jueguang, who was in charge of maintaining order among the newcomers in the Blue Cloud Pavilion, glanced at Lin Yi and said, "Junior brother Lin Yi, tell me, how many spiritual herb seeds do you plan to submit?" Although he really wanted to get rid of Lin Yi, this thorn that had repeatedly opposed him, he still had to maintain the demeanor of a senior brother in charge in such a public place. Moreover, this assessment was basically presided over by the people of the Spirit Medicine Nursery. If Su Lingchong did not appear, Meng Jueguang alone would not be able to talk to these people. Naturally, he would not be able to obstruct them. Even if he wanted to create trouble for Lin Yi, he would not have the opportunity to do so. He could only obediently follow the procedures. Chapter 3754. Even if he couldn't kill him that way, he could use the opportunity to screw him over and make his points drop like crazy. Maybe Meng Tong could even overtake him, and that would be something to be happy about. You're our Clear Cloud Pavilion's #1 new disciple. No matter what, you should at least register a little more to bring honor to our Clear Cloud Pavilion. Meng Jueguang's face was full of righteousness as he spoke. Heh, you guys might not know this, but Bro Lin Yi was already an elixir refiner back in the common world. He has a thorough understanding of the properties of these elixirs. He's a true expert. Getting 20 to 30 pills is nothing to him. It's already a waste of his abilities. I think it's no problem for him to get more. Kong Xiaoming saw the situation and helped to flatter him. With all the conflicts he had with Lin Yi, he wouldn't let go of a chance like this that could put Lin Yi in a difficult position. After he said that, the other newbies in Blue Cloud Pavilion went into an uproar. They only knew that Lin Yi was strong, but they didn't expect him to be a refiner. Although the status of alchemists in the cultivation world had always been considered high, because most of their energy was devoted to alchemy, and their strength was mostly improved by taking various elixirs, their strength was generally weaker than other experts of the same level. Of course, there were exceptions to everything. Dan God Zhang Liju wasn't just someone who stood at the peak of refiners, he was also extremely strong. Not any weaker than the other giants of Sky Class Island. What the newbies didn't expect was that Lin Yi, who stood in front of them, was a monster as well. Not only was he strong enough to crush masters of the same level, but he was also a rare refiner. Although his level was far from being on the same level as the Dan God Zhang Liju, but compared to the newbies of the 3 pavilions, he was already a powerful existence. All of a sudden, all the newbies looked at Lin Yi with even more envy, jealousy, and hatred. Damn, So you're a refiner. You're a refiner. We can't waste such a great opportunity. We've already gotten 2 full marks. It'd be weird if we don't try, right? I think 30 is too little. Just because of your reputation as a pretentious newbie, you have to aim for full marks no matter what. Otherwise, it would be too degrading. Meng Tong heard this and immediately echoed in surprise.
To him, if Lin Yi did not make a fatal mistake, then he would not be able to surpass Lin Yi in the subsequent rounds of the assessment.
He could only be stepped on by Lin Yi. Only a test like the elixir trial that could deduct points could help him close the gap quickly, or even overtake the others. Of course, this was all based on the premise that Lin Yi was hot-headed and made a huge mistake. If Lin Yi were to honestly report 10 elixir seeds like the other rookies, he would have no chance at all. Just by relying on the huge advantage accumulated in the previous 2 rounds, he was already able to defeat him. A group of people began to flatter and ridicule him.
Lin Yi glanced at them with a faint smile.
This was a classic tactic of flattery. But it was just as well. Without the help of these people, it would be really hard for him to ask for 40 pills. But now it was only logical. Junior brother Lin, you should be careful and just say 10. This thing is not easy to get, and it can easily affect the 4th round of the assessment. It will be very strenuous. Don't listen to these people's bewitchment, senior brother Kubai reminded him in a low voice. Lin Yi nodded knowingly and gave the other party a reassuring look. Then, he walked to the front and faced the Spirit Medicine Nursery's manager. Since everyone is so supportive of me, there's no reason for me to disappoint everyone. So, I'll just say 40. Actually, Kong Xiaoming is right. I wanted to say 80. Kong Xiaoming said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, the crowd was in an uproar. Not to mention senior brother Kubai and the others who were on Lin Yi's side. Even Meng Jueguang and Kong Mingming, who had been constantly mocking him, were all stunned. Could it be that Lin Yi was really so easily provoked? Just because he was casually mocked by a few words, he chose all 40 seeds like an idiot? An 80 at that? You really live up to your title as a pretentious newcomer with your pretentious act. Meng Tong was also secretly delighted. He had great hopes. The sissy manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery could not help but cover his mouth with his hand.
He sized up Lin Yi in surprise and said, "Are you sure?"
When he introduced the rules previously, he had already made it clear that even the most proficient disciple in planting spiritual herbs would not be able to nurture 40 spiritual herb seeds within 3 months. The survival rate could not be guaranteed. As a newcomer, even if this Lin Yi was an alchemist who was more familiar with the habits of spiritual herbs, he chose all 40 seeds in one go. This was simply thinking that he had too many points and wanted to take the opportunity to harm himself. One must know that although pill masters frequently came into contact with spiritual medicines, but ultimately, this was a completely different matter from spiritual medicine planters. To put it bluntly, alchemists were like chefs.
Although they came into contact with all kinds of vegetables and ingredients every day and could make good dishes, if they were asked to plant vegetables because of this, that was simply a fraud.
How could cooking and planting vegetables be the same thing? Kong Mingming was the most popular new disciple in the Soaring Sky Pavilion. He was also an alchemist, but he only dared to choose 20 seeds. Wasn't he courting death by announcing 40 seeds in one go? Moreover, they were about to enter the 4th round of assessment at the same time? I'm sure. Lin Yi nodded his head affirmatively, completely ignoring the strange expressions of everyone present. This time, even the sissy manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery had nothing to say. He had already kindly given Lin Yi a chance to back out, but Lin Yi refused to repent. Thus, there was nothing he could do. He could only nod his head and ask someone to prepare the spiritual herb seeds for Lin Yi. Actually, he did not know Lin Yi at all. Whether Lin Yi lived or died had nothing to do with him. He only felt pity for these spiritual herb seeds. Although they were cultivated in batches by the pill hall and the cost was not too high, they were still spiritual herb seeds. If they were cultivated well, they would become real spiritual herbs. However, if they were given to a newcomer like Lin Yi who overestimated himself, there would not be many that could survive. However, the newcomer assessment in the welcoming pavilion this time was an important measure approved by the Elders Guild. As the manager of the Spirit Medicine Nursery, no matter how much his heart ached for these spiritual herb seeds, he could only pinch his nose and cooperate. As they watched Lin Yi receive the 40 sealed spiritual herb seeds, Meng Jueguang and Kong Mingming looked at each other, their faces full of sarcasm. It seemed that this pretentious newcomer really thought that he was invincible after getting full marks for 2 God-level assessments. He dared to jump into any trap. Chapter 3755. In fact, after the previous incident of exchanging spiritual jades, whether it was Meng Jueguang or Meng Tong, they both came to the conclusion that although Lin Yi's strength was superb, his IQ was really not high. He was just lucky and had some strength. However, if he could make use of his IQ, then Lin Yi was really not difficult to deal with. On the other hand, Kong Mingming was a little surprised. It was reasonable to say that Lin Yi was not such a stupid existence in the secular world. Why did he start to become so reckless when he came to Heaven Stage Island? Could it be that the heaven and earth spiritual qi was too abundant and made him dizzy? Pretentious newbie, we are looking forward to your God-level performance of getting 3 full marks in a row. Don't let us down. Of course, if the entire team is wiped out and 40 points are deducted, that would also be a good story, right? Anyway, you have a lot of points, so just treat it as showing off your style. Meng Tong couldn't help but chuckle and tease. In his opinion, Lin Yi took the initiative to court death this time. Even if he was an alchemist, it was impossible for him to not fall after registering to choose all 40 spiritual medicine seeds. The only difference was how many points he would lose. Although it was not very realistic to let Lin Yi's 40 spiritual medicine seeds be wiped out, if God opened his eyes and let him lose 20 to 30 spiritual medicine seeds, it was very possible. In this way, at least 20 to 30 points would be deducted from Lin Yi this time, and if he, Meng Tong, could only guarantee to get 10 points this time, then the huge difference of 33 points accumulated in the previous 2 rounds could be made up, and he could even achieve a reversal. It was simply awesome. Brother Meng Tong, you are thinking too much. No matter what, Lin Yi is also an alchemist. How can he be wiped out? Kong Mingming pretended to be righteous and said seriously, with his ability, cultivating 3 or 4 spiritual medicine seeds is absolutely not a problem at all, but more than that is a little difficult. After all, the 4th round of assessment is coming up. He is under a lot of pressure as the first to stand out. A person's strength is limited. You have to be understanding. Meng Jueguang nodded and said, what junior brother Kong said is very reasonable. Junior brother Lin Yi got 2 full marks in a row. He's the top newcomer of our Blue Cloud Pavilion. Everyone else should learn from him. The 4th assessment round is a rare opportunity to learn from each other. This kind of opportunity to challenge an expert is very rare. Don't let it go so easily. The group of Clear Cloud Pavilion's new disciples that had pledged their allegiance to him all agreed loudly. Although Lin Yi's existence was no longer on the same level in their eyes, it was human nature to be jealous. After all, they were all new disciples of Clear Cloud Pavilion. Why is it that you, Lin Yi, can be in the limelight, but us ordinary rookies can't? Next, they would have the opportunity to openly annoy Lin Yi, which was exactly what they were looking for. Seeing the reaction of the rookies, Meng Jueguang and Kong Mingming smiled proudly. From their point of view, Lin Yi had gotten 40 seeds all at once. It was already very stressful. If he was targeted in the next assessment round, he would be killed instantly. Even if they couldn't kill him directly, they would tire him out. It would be good if he could recover a little qi every day to deal with the challenges of the assessment. Cultivating 40 seeds? Dream on. Meng Jueguang and the others were very proud of themselves. However, Zhong Pingliang and Li Zhangming, who were mixed in the middle, were sneering at the same time. With boss Lin Yi's style, he never fought a battle without preparation. What the hell were these idiots laughing at? When the assessment results came out, who knew who was the idiot? With 40 seeds in his hand, Lin Yi didn't care about Meng Jueguang and the others' mockery. He walked straight back to bitter senior brother and the others. Junior brother Lin Yu, what do you want me to say? Bitter senior brother looked at Lin Yi's calm expression and didn't know what to say. Although from his point of view, Lin Yi's actions today were indeed too reckless and brainless. It was no different from looking for death. But don't forget Lin Yi's performance in the previous 2 rounds. Every time, it was far beyond their expectations. Especially the last resistance assessment. Lin Yi ignored the advice and chose the peak early stage of foundation establishment. At that time, bitter senior brother even thought that Lin Yi would die on the spot. But reality proved that Lin Yi never did anything he wasn't confident in. Even bitter senior brother himself wasn't confident in the next full-force attack from the peak early stage of foundation establishment. Lin Yi took it without a sound and escaped unscathed. He even got full marks for God level. So today, Lin Yi chose all 40 seeds.
Although it was hard for him to believe, there was no need to say anything.
After all, even if he didn't have the ability, it didn't mean that Lin Yi couldn't. What if Lin Yi really could cultivate so many seeds?
However, even if Lin Yi really had the confidence to cultivate so many seeds, the fourth round of assessment was about to begin.
It was obvious that he would be targeted by Meng Jueguang and the others again. Bitter senior brother was really worried for Lin Yi.
Hee, bitter senior brother. You guys really don't have to worry about me.
I know what I'm doing. Lin Yi smiled as if nothing had happened. Then, he looked at Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai, who were also hesitant to speak.
He suddenly lowered his voice and said, "When we go back, both of you give me the seeds.
I'll help you cultivate them." Ha! The three of them, including bitter senior brother, were stunned at the same time. Not only did this guy choose all 40 seeds, but he also wanted Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai's. Wouldn't that be a total of 60 seeds? Boss Lin Yi, are you sure it's okay to do this? Even Xiao Ran, who had always been calm and reserved, could not help but ask in a low voice this time. He was not afraid that the matter would be leaked out and Hu Yunfeng and the others would say that he was cheating. In fact, if Meng Jueguang and the others knew about it, not only would they not stop him, but they would also push the boat along with the current. It would be best if they could not wait to exhaust Lin Yi. Xiao Ran was worried for Lin Yi.
After all, in the eyes of any normal person, 40 seeds already meant that they would have to spend a lot of vital energy on them.
Even if there were no other disturbances, this alone would be quite taxing. Chapter 3756.
40 pills was already enough to make people laugh at him as an idiot, and if Lin Yi were to take both of their pills, it would be 60 pills in total, and he'd have to supply qi to them every day. Just the thought of it was enough to make one's knees go weak.
What they didn't know was that Lin Yi wasn't only planning on taking their seeds. He was planning on taking Pin Liang and Li Zhengming's seeds as well. Zhong Pingliang had 15 seeds, Li Zhengming had 10, Xiao Ran had 10, Qiao Hongkai had 10, and Lin Yi had 40. That was a total of 85 seeds.
Not to mention the newcomers from the 3 pavilions, even the herb grower in the spirit medicine nursery, who was the most proficient in cultivating seeds, would probably faint on the spot if he was told that he had to cultivate all the seeds in just 3 months.
What a joke! Nurturing a total of 85 spiritual herb seeds would take 3 months. Even if they were placed in the spirit medicine nursery with abundant spiritual energy, there was no need to worry about the lack of spiritual energy. Just providing spiritual energy to them to ripen them every day was enough to drain them dry. However, Lin Yi had full confidence in this. Don't forget that he had always relied on the space in the jade pendant. It was simply a cheat when dealing with this kind of task.
In terms of spiritual energy, the concentration of spiritual energy in the space in the jade pendant was definitely higher than any other cave.
Even the spirit medicine nursery, which was extremely rich in spiritual energy because of the countless spirit jade piled up, was still far behind the jade pendant. In terms of qi, Lin Yi, who had the spiritual energy in the space in the jade pendant, had no problem even if he poured qi into the seeds to ripen them all day long. Even if he was injured in the 4th round of the assessment, it didn't matter. After a quick recovery, there wouldn't be any problems with qi interruption that others were worried about. After all, what Lin Yi had to do was nothing more than to become the intermediary between the space in the jade pendant and the seeds. The speed of qi replenishment was far higher than the speed of qi consumption. Naturally, they were not like the others, who would take a few days to recover after expending too much of their true qi. If they were not careful, they might even lose a level. What's more, Lin Yi had an even more reliable method, which was completely effortless. Don't worry, there's no problem. I can guarantee the survival rate. Lin Yi smiled confidently. Very well. I believe in Boss Lin Yi. Xiao Hongkai immediately raised both of her hands in agreement. After witnessing Lin Yi's various miraculous performances, she now had an almost blind admiration for Lin Yi. Since Boss Lin Yi wasn't acting on impulse, it meant that he definitely had the confidence. Listening to him was definitely the right choice. At this point, even if Xiao Ran was still a little worried about whether Lin Yi would seriously overdraw his qi, he could only choose to believe in Lin Yi. All right, I understand. However, although senior brother Ku Qian and Xiao Ran had already guessed that since Lin Yi dared to do this, he must have his confidence. But the 3 of them did not have the slightest intention of probing what exactly Lin Yi was relying on. After all, no matter how close their relationship was. Some things were likely to involve personal secrets. It was better not to ask. If the three of them needed to know, with Lin Yi's personality, he would definitely take the initiative to tell them instead of hiding it. On the contrary, if they asked now, and it was not convenient for Lin Yi to say it for the time being, it would only cause embarrassment. They naturally had this sense of propriety. Don't ask what you shouldn't ask. Don't listen to what you shouldn't listen. This was the most basic principle between cultivators. After all, their privacy often involved their lives, and it was far more important than the privacy of ordinary people. After Lin Yi, all the rookies from the 3 pavilions had finished receiving their seeds. Then, everyone was given a container specially used to cultivate spiritual medicine seeds. Lin Yi observed it and found that although the cultivation container could not actively provide spiritual energy, it had the effect of absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy. It was just like how ordinary plants could use their developed roots to absorb water from the depths of the soil in all directions. Even if they grew in dry areas that lacked water, they could still ensure a certain degree of water supply. This specialized cultivation container clearly had the same effect in terms of absorbing spiritual energy. It had the same effect in terms of absorbing spirit qi, but it had a limitation. Each cultivation vessel could only plant 10 spirit herb seeds at once. If more were planted, due to the close proximity and density of the seeds, they would compete viciously for the spiritual energy. This way, no matter how rich the spiritual energy outside was, there was a high chance that a few spiritual medicine seeds in the middle would die due to the lack of spiritual energy. As a result, the rookies who had received 10 or even 20 spiritual medicine seeds could only choose to cultivate them in batches. Fortunately, the spiritual medicine seeds usually took 15 to 20 days to grow, and the assessment period was 3 months. Not only could they be divided into 2 batches, but they could also be divided into 3 or even 4 batches. In fact, in addition to ensuring that there was sufficient spiritual energy, they also had to ensure that every seed was continuously infused with sufficient vital energy. Most rookies had already planned to divide the spiritual medicine seeds into 3 or 4 batches to cultivate, with only 3 or 4 seeds in each batch. This way they could focus on them and ensure that there was an adequate supply of spiritual energy and vital energy. This way they could at least ensure that these 2 hard conditions could satisfy their basic needs as much as possible. However, other rookies had this concern, but Lin Yi did not. This was because he had no intention of using the cultivation containers provided by the Spirit Medicine Nursery. He planned to directly get some soil into the space of the jade pendant after he returned, and then transplant all 85 spiritual medicine seeds that he, Xiaoran, and the others had into the space of the jade pendant. There was no need to worry about the lack of spiritual energy or vital energy. To Lin Yi, the space of the jade pendant was simply a natural cultivation container for spiritual medicine seeds. Moreover, it was a real divine tool. In this way, if there were no accidents, all 85 seeds should be cultivated in the next 20 days. Although it was not 100% guaranteed that they would germinate and grow seedlings, with a godly cheating tool like the space of the jade pendant, one could easily know that their survival rate was much higher than the other rookies. It would not be a problem for them to get a high score. Chapter 3757. After all, although the other newcomers saw the assessment points as the lifeblood of their future, in Lin Yi's eyes, it was just a formality. There was nothing wrong with having a higher score, but even if it was a lower score, it didn't matter. At least he could keep a low profile. As for the reward that was linked to the assessment points, it was just a foundation-breaking pill, and it was only a normal quality one. If Lin Yi wanted to, he could easily make a dozen of higher quality ones, so he didn't care at all. Compared to the foundation-breaking pill, the materials needed to make the foundation-breaking pill were far less troublesome. At least, there wasn't a need for rare herbs like the heart-devouring exquisite grass. As long as one had spirit jade on hand, they could be bought with a little effort. Of course, although the foundation-breaking pill and the foundation-breaking pill were both level 4 elixirs, their true value couldn't be compared to the latter. Especially for an alchemist like Lin Yi, the difference was even greater. The foundation-breaking pill was rare because of the heart-devouring exquisite grass, so Lin Yi decided to choose all 40 elixir seeds. The reason why he asked for the seeds of Xiao Ran, Qiao Hongkai, Zhong Pingliang, and Li Zhangming was not only to help them, but also to see if there were any seeds of the heart-devouring exquisite grass among the seeds they randomly picked. If there were, he would naturally accept it. However, although the assessment of the spiritual herb trial today gave Lin Yi a huge surprise, there was one thing that made him feel a little regretful.
The sissy manager of the spirit medicine nursery had mentioned that this batch of elixir seeds was cultivated in batches. So there was a huge flaw. Even if this batch of elixir seeds could be successfully cultivated into seedlings, they could only survive as a single plant. They wouldn't be able to breed further. Otherwise, Lin Yi could have planted them in the jade space and cultivated them for generations. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about the heart-devouring exquisite grass anymore. But then again, the greatest taboo in life was to be greedy and insatiable. If one was too greedy, one's fate would inevitably end early. Being able to obtain a heart-devouring exquisite grass seed in this round of assessment was already a pleasant surprise that made Lin Yi very satisfied. If he could find another heart-devouring exquisite grass seed in the selection round that Xiao Ran and the others had drawn, then it would be even more delightful. As for the heart-devouring exquisite grass, it could be cultivated generation after generation. This kind of thing was just a thought. Lin Yi did not say that he must have such an extravagant wish. After everyone received the spirit herb seeds and cultivation containers, the next step was to observe and learn the method of infusing spiritual qi into the spirit herb seeds. This method was very simple. It was nothing more than controlling the release of spiritual qi, allowing it to penetrate the skin of the seed and permeate the inside. Wrap it up and nourish it. During the cultivation period, it should last for an hour every day. Elixir seeds were spiritual objects of heaven and earth. For them, the Xianxia in a person's body was not only able to meet their growth needs like the natural spiritual energy of heaven and earth, but because it was more stimulating, it was like artificial hormones, speeding up their growth cycle, allowing them to germinate within 15 to 20 days.
Grow seedlings.
However, because the vitality of the elixir seeds was extremely fragile, when infusing them with spiritual qi, the concentration of spiritual qi must be controlled within a certain range, and it had to be maintained for an hour every day. They could not be greedy for more than this, and they could not be greedy for less than this.
Otherwise, it would not be able to stimulate them.
Otherwise, the stimulation would be too strong, and they would be stimulated to death. After observing for a period of time and grasping the essentials of infusing spiritual qi, the rookies of the 3 pavilions dispersed and returned to their respective caves to experiment and ponder. After all, in 3 days, the 4th round of the assessment would begin at the same time, and they had to figure it out as soon as possible within these 3 days. Otherwise, when the 4th round of the assessment began, they would not have so much time and energy to spend on it. On the way back to the welcoming pavilion, Lin Yi quietly found an opportunity while he was not being noticed. He asked for Zhong Pingliang and Li Zhongming's respective spirit herb seeds. The degree of admiration these two had for him was even higher than that of Qiao Hongkai. As soon as Lin Yi asked, they handed over the spirit herb seeds without hesitation, not even asking for the reason. After returning to the cave, Lin Yi couldn't wait to take out all the spirit herb seeds that Xiao Ran and the others had picked. Because each seed was individually sealed and labeled, it was easy to see what kind of seeds they were. After looking through it carefully, Lin Yi finally found another heart-devouring exquisite grass seed among Zhong Pingliang's 15 spirit herb seeds. As for the other 3, they regrettably missed it. However, this result was already very satisfactory to Lin Yi. 1 for himself and 1 for Zhong Pingliang, adding up to 2 heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds, if they could be successfully cultivated. According to the experience of refining the foundation building pill last time, 2 stalks of heart-devouring exquisite grass were enough to refine 2 foundation building pills. If he was still not satisfied with this, then he would really be too greedy. Lin Yi went out for a stroll in the outskirts, tossing a few piles of dirt into the jade space. Any dirt that entered the jade space, it was guaranteed that it would become spiritual soil with an abundance of spirit energy, but different herbs required different soil types in addition to the spirit energy they needed. Some needed to be drier, some needed to be more wet, some needed to be more alkaline, some needed to be more acidic, and the requirements for the various trace elements in the soil were not the same. Although it could be guaranteed to survive as long as there was enough spirit energy, whether or not it could be cultivated well depended on whether or not it could be cultivated well.
Lin Yi didn't really care about the other spirit herb seeds.
After all, as long as they successfully cultivated the seedlings, he would be able to get points, and he would have to return them to the pill hall. The most important thing was the survival rate, the quality of the spirit herb was secondary.
However, the 2 heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds were different. This was something that Lin Yi needed to take care of. Just ensuring that they survived was obviously not enough. According to the sissy manager of the spirit medicine nursery, because this batch of spirit herb seeds were cultivated in batches by the spirit medicine nursery, compared to natural seeds, they were inferior seeds. Not only could they not be cultivated,
But even if they survived, the quality of the spirit herb seeds would be far inferior to naturally grown spirit herb seeds.
Chapter 3758. At that time, he should have been able to refine 2 of them. However, due to the poor quality of the 2 heart-devouring exquisite grass, he could only refine 1. That was really a scam. In order to ensure that the heart-devouring exquisite grass could grow as well as possible, apart from the crucial supply of spiritual energy and true energy, choosing suitable dry soil was also crucial. Lin Yi naturally did not dare to be negligent in this aspect. After preparing a few batches of different soil in the space of the jade pendant, Lin Yi immediately returned to the cave dwelling and transplanted all 85 spiritual medicine seeds. Then, according to what he had learned in the pill hall, he began to instill true energy into these spiritual medicine seeds. If it were other newcomers, with their strength at the great perfection of heaven stage, in order to ensure the effect of true energy stimulation, even if they went all out, they could at most guarantee to instill true energy into 3 to 4 spiritual medicine seeds at the same time. However, Lin Yi was now an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment realm. He only needed to instill a certain amount of true energy into each spiritual medicine seed. Not to mention 3 or 4, even dozens of spiritual medicine seeds would be more than enough. Moreover, with the replenishment of spiritual energy from the space of the jade pendant, the true energy in his body was endless, and he did not need to worry about the problem of overdrafting his true energy like others. The 85 spiritual medicine seeds only needed to be divided into 2 batches, and each batch was infused for an hour according to the set amount, and Lin Yi's task for the day would be considered completed. And after this, he only needed to continue this for 20 days to see the results. At that time, how many of these seeds could grow, especially the 2 heart-devouring exquisite grass seeds that Lin Yi was most concerned about, how they would grow in the end, and whether the space in the jade pendant would be able to nurture divine weapons like what he had expected, it all remained to be seen. According to Lin Yi's speculation, even if the effect of nurturing in the space of the jade pendant was not the best, it would definitely not be bad, at least not worse than the results of other newcomers. In the next 3 days, Lin Yi went to the spirit jade hall to mine in the day, and came back at night to instill true energy into the spiritual medicine seeds for a total of 2 hours. After that, he would cultivate as usual. And in fact, the process of instilling true energy was in itself a different way of cultivation, so to Lin Yi, this was no different from his usual rhythm, and he was rather leisurely. In comparison, the other rookies did not have it as easy. Although they did not have to take care of a total of 85 spiritual herb seeds like Lin Yi did, they did not have to do so. However, just dealing with 3 or 4 spiritual herb seeds a day was already difficult enough. Not only did he have to work tirelessly every day to inject vital qi into the seed, but he also had to find a way to recover his vital qi after he was done. It should be known that this process was very tedious and strenuous for an ordinary newcomer without a heaven-defying golden finger like the space in the jade pendant. Apart from that, they also had to worry about these seeds. The newcomers from the Soaring Sky Pavilion and the Profound Pavilion might have it slightly better. At the very least, the density of the spiritual energy inside the cave abodes was still acceptable. However, the newcomers from the Blue Cloud Pavilion were in a tough spot. Aside from having to ensure a daily supply of quintessential qi, they also had to think of ways to increase the supply of spiritual energy. This was very difficult. One must know that they were not like Lin Yi who had a jade pendant space. They were also not like the pill hall and the spirit medicine nursery, where they could throw spiritual jades all over the ground in order to increase the density of spiritual energy. They only had a few spiritual jades on hand, and they were reluctant to use them for their own cultivation. Fortunately, the points of the newcomers from the 3 great pavilions were calculated separately. They did not need to compete with the Soaring Sky Pavilion and the Profound Pavilion. They only needed to surpass the newcomers from the Blue Cloud Pavilion. Not enough spiritual energy. This was a common problem for everyone. If all the spiritual herb seeds of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers died together, it would not matter. At most, no one would get any points. In any case, it was fine as long as they did not lose to others. Do your best and leave it to fate. This was the thinking of most of the Blue Cloud Pavilion newcomers. Every day, they would think of all kinds of ways to supply spiritual energy to the spiritual herb seeds. When the time came, it would be delightful if they succeeded. If they failed, there was nothing they could do. Compared to the busy newcomers, Lin Yi, Xiao Ran, and Xiao Hongkai appeared to be very leisurely. Lin Yi had the jade pendant space artifact to rely on, while Xiao Ran and Xiao Hongkai simply gave the spiritual herb seeds to Lin Yi.
They did not need to worry about this matter at all. They only needed to prepare for the fourth assessment that was about to begin. What Lin Yi did not know was that in these 3 days, a moderate storm had occurred in the inner street of the market, and the cause of the incident was because of him. On this day, when it was almost noon, a cultivator who looked like a youth but was actually over 100 years old came to the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce. He did not buy anything and directly asked the shopkeeper, Hong Zhong, to come out and see him. Although Hong Zhong was a shopkeeper of the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce and had a high status, he was still a businessman after all. He paid attention to making money by being amiable. Hearing the other party's tone of calling him out in public, although he was a little displeased, he still politely invited him into the private room. "May I ask your name?" Hong Zhong saw that the other party was dressed luxuriously and had an extraordinary temperament, so he took the initiative to ask. Unexpectedly, the man raised his eyebrows and said with a sneer, "What? As a shopkeeper of a chamber of commerce, you don't even know me, and you still have the nerve to mingle in this North Island market? Didn't your master teach you that you should learn to pay respect to others when you want to do business?" Hong Zhong's heart shuddered, and he carefully looked at the other party a few times again. He couldn't help but think, is this guy a new big shot of the 3 pavilions? It's true that you need to pay respect to others when you want to do business, but with the power and influence of the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce as the top chamber of commerce on the 5 Heaven Stage Islands, ordinary local tyrants would take the initiative to pay respect to them. In the entire North Island of the Heaven Stage Island, only a few people needed to be greeted by the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce. However, Hong Zhong had been in this branch of the North Island for decades, and he had met those giants of the North Island more than once or twice. He had already paid respect to those who should have paid respect to him. Not only did he have a good relationship with those big shots in the Elders Club, but even a newly promoted strong man like Ram Jia, the hall master of the law enforcement hall, also took the initiative to express his goodwill to him. There was no reason for him to miss out any big shot. Although the strength of the guy in front of him was not bad, he was far from the level of those big shots. At most, he could only show off in front of ordinary cultivators. Where did he get the courage to challenge the Hong Clan Chamber of Commerce? Could it be that he was a second-generation cultivator? Although he was suspicious in his heart, Hong Zhong was still polite on the surface. He ordered people to prepare tea, and once again lowered his posture and said, "Please tell me." Chapter 3759. Nan Tianyong? Hong Zhong was stunned. He thought about it carefully in his mind, but found that he had never heard of this name. Otherwise, with his photographic memory, as long as he had heard this name, he would never have no impression at all. However, since he claimed to be from Towering Pavilion, he must have some background. Maybe he was the second generation of a big shot in the North Island, but he didn't come out much before? Hong Zhong secretly speculated and continued to ask calmly, "Then, Your Excellency, what can I do for you today?" Nan Tianyong drank up the expensive tea in the cup. The manservant next to him twitched his mouth and secretly scolded this guy for wasting God's gift. Then he snorted and said, "I heard a long time ago that there is a big Hong's Chamber of Commerce in the inner street of the market, but I didn't have time to come and take a look. So I took the time today to come and take a look. By the way, I want to seek justice for my useless disciple." As he spoke, Nan Tianyong's powerful aura poured out unreservedly, causing all the tables and chairs in the private room to tremble. If it wasn't for the fact that there were servants around to protect them, some of the precious porcelain would have been shattered. "Seek justice? What's the name of your disciple? What's the problem with our Hong's Chamber of Commerce?" Hong Zhong's face suddenly became cold. As the manager of the branch of the Hong's Chamber of Commerce, although he said that harmony could make money, he was also a big shot. If the other party wanted to help his business, then he naturally had to greet him with a smile. But since it was obvious that the other party was here to make trouble, there was no need to bow to anyone. In this small North Island, although the Hong's Chamber of Commerce had many good relationships and would not easily make enemies with others unless it was necessary, with their power and confidence, if they really met any enemies, there was no need to bow to anyone at all. If you dared to show your teeth to the Hong's Chamber of Commerce, you must have such good teeth first. And as far as Hong Zhong knew, there were definitely no more than 3 people in the North Island who had such good teeth. However, Nan Tianyong didn't care about Hong Zhong's expression at all. He crossed his legs and said with an unfriendly face, "My disciple, surnamed Yu, single name Xia." "Yu Xia?" Hong Zhong couldn't help but furrow his brows. He still didn't have much of an impression. Unless it was an important guest like Lin Yi who could casually give him 2 top-grade foundation breaking pellets, he wouldn't even ask for the name of an ordinary guest. Naturally, he didn't know who this Wuxia represented. Seeing that Hong Zhong still did not speak, Nan Tianyong snorted coldly and continued, "My disciple came here 2 days ago, saying that he had taken a fancy to some lousy stone. Originally, he sincerely wanted to help your business, but in the end, not only did he not manage to buy it, but he also got into a conflict with someone and ended up in a half-dead state. He is still lying in bed today, and we don't even know if he can recover. This happened to your Hong Chamber of Commerce. You have to give us an explanation." So it was the person who had competed with Second Lin over the star ink stone. Only then did Hong Zhong understand. Although he didn't know Wuxia's name, he had a deep impression of Wuxia with his ability to read people. Although Wuxia had disguised himself very well, he still couldn't escape his eyes. That youth from the soaring pavilion was very good at disguising himself to numb others. He was truly a scheming person. Experts of the same level who were slightly inexperienced would probably fall for his tricks. However, what truly shocked Hong Zhong was not this. Rather, it was the meaning behind Nan Tianyong's words. This scheming Wuxia, at the time, had clearly set his sights on the star inkstone in Second Lin's hands. In addition, he was an expert of the middle stage of the foundation establishment stage, while Second Lin was only an expert at the peak of the early stage of the foundation establishment stage. There was a difference of an entire stage. Adding on the fact that he had pretended to be superficial to numb the opponent, in theory, Second Lin should have had no chance of escaping his pursuit. Even if Hong Zhong had intentionally pointed it out at the time, in his view, for some reason, Second Lin hadn't taken it to heart. If things continued to develop, he would definitely suffer. However, in the end, he was just a businessman and couldn't speak too clearly. Otherwise, he would take the initiative to offend others. This was a major taboo in the business world. However, from Nan Tianyong's short words, not only did that Wuxia not gain any advantage over Second Lin, but he was beaten half to death and suffered a great loss. From the looks of it, although he had thought highly of this mysterious Lin heir, he had still underestimated him. Not only could he casually take out 2 top-quality foundation establishment barrier-breaking pills, but he was also able to kill powerful and cunning enemies who were stronger than him. This Lin heir, who didn't look very impressive, was the one who had hidden his true strength. After thinking this through, Hong Zhong couldn't help but rejoice in his heart. It could be seen that he hadn't given the Spirit Jade card to the wrong person. Second Lin was definitely a super potential stock worth investing in. At the end of the day, every Spirit Jade card produced by the Merchant Alliance was a symbol of identity and status in the entire 5 great islands of the Heaven stage. Even if it was given to a manager of the Hong Merchant Alliance, there weren't many of them. There was no need to doubt their value. To Hong Zhong, every Spirit Jade card he gave out was an important investment. If some of them disappeared without a trace, then it would be a loss. If some of them became an important customer that could truly bring in huge profits, then it would be a profit. This standard was placed on Lin heir. Although he could casually take out 2 supreme-grade bottleneck breaking pills, and in Hong Zhong's eyes, he was definitely an important customer. However, if he was casually killed by Wuxia after leaving the house, then to Hong Zhong, it would still be a very bad investment. After all, no matter how powerful a dead person was when they were alive, they couldn't bring him any profit after death. But now, it seemed that Second Lin was not an ordinary person. Now that he thought about it, it was a rare and wise decision to bet on him. Seeing that Hong Zhong was silent, Nan Tianyong couldn't help but say angrily, "You are the manager here. Come and tell me what happened." "What? You don't dare to speak? Or are you mute?" As he spoke, Nan Tianyong was about to go berserk. Hong Zhong then replied in a low voice, "I'm sorry, my shop is only open for business. The one who had a conflict with your disciple is not my shop, but someone else. So I don't think I need to give you any explanation." "What? It has nothing to do with you?" Nan Tianyong was so angry that he laughed instead. "Nothing to do with you? Then who does it have to do with?" "My disciple got into trouble because he came here to buy something, and it has nothing to do with you?" Chapter 3760. This guy is just a supervisory deacon of Soaring Sky Pavilion? When Hong Zhong heard this, he couldn't help but look at Nan Tianyong strangely again. This guy looks like a normal person. Why is he so stupid? A mere supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion dares to bully the Hong Chamber of Commerce? Where does this guy get his confidence from? Where does his boldness come from? Should I say that this guy is really bold? Or should I say that he is fearless because he doesn't know the meaning of the Hong Chamber of Commerce? Logically speaking, anyone with a bit of brain and knowledge should know what kind of existence the Hong Chamber of Commerce was. He shouldn't be so ignorant. The so-called supervisory deacon of Soaring Sky Pavilion was equivalent to a member of the Law Enforcement Hall in Soaring Sky Pavilion. It was a special envoy sent by the Law Enforcement Hall to the three great pavilions. But in fact, it had to accept the leadership of the three great pavilions and the Law Enforcement Hall. To put it bluntly, it could supervise everything, but it had to follow the wishes of the higher-ups on both sides. It was fine to scare ordinary disciples, but in fact, if a disciple made a small mistake, it was still up to the three great pavilions to make a decision. Unless it was a big mistake, the Law Enforcement Hall would directly intervene, and it had nothing to do with the supervisory deacon. Therefore, the supervisory deacon had a lot of power. This identity was not even worth a fart in front of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Even the pavilion master of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, Xianxia, had to look up to the Hong Chamber of Commerce. How could a mere supervisory deacon dare to come to the Hong Chamber of Commerce and spout nonsense? Did this guy take the wrong medicine? Or did he forget to take his medicine when he went out today? What they didn't know was that Nan Tianyong had always been arrogant. He had been working in the back mountain hall, and apart from his disciple, Wuxia, he had little contact with the outside world. In recent years, he had been in closed-door training in order to break through. Only when he succeeded in his closed-door training was he transferred back to Soaring Sky Pavilion to take up the important position of supervisory deacon. However, he had only been in office for a few days when his only disciple, Wuxia, was beaten half to death. As his master, of course, he had to stand up for him. Wuxia had added oil and vinegar to stir up trouble, so he had come to seek justice. Before this, although he had heard of the Hong Chamber of Commerce's name, he did not take it to heart at all. It was merely an unscrupulous merchant that exploited ordinary people. It was nothing in front of him, the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. He has a backer? Damn it. Who doesn't have a backer? How could an ordinary disciple of the Law Enforcement Hall be sent to the Soaring Sky Pavilion without a backer? Furthermore, the three Nan Tianyong brothers could be considered to have deep roots in the Heaven Stage North Island, so they were usually somewhat unscrupulous in their actions. Thus, the scene before them appeared. The dignified Hong Chamber of Commerce was actually stopped by a mere supervisory deacon. Hong Zhong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. It was the first time he had encountered such an inexplicable and rare thing in decades. However, although Hong Zhong found it funny, he still held back his laughter and asked seriously, "Then what do you think should be done?" Nan Tianyong raised his eyebrows and pretended to be magnanimous. "Don't say that I'm blackmailing you. You can compensate me with 1,000 pieces of spirit jade as compensation for the damages. Also, tell me the background of the guy who tried to snatch the stone from my disciple 2 days ago, and we can forget about this matter. How about it?" Hearing this, Hong Zhong and the other servants in the shop couldn't help but laugh. 1,000 pieces of spiritual jade? This guy really dared to ask for it. This idiot who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, running over to stand up for Wuxia today was a lie. He really wanted to take the opportunity to get the spirit jade for himself. "I'm sorry, I can't comply with either of your two requests." Seeing that Nan Tianyong seemed to show signs of anger, Hong Zhong finally replied. Even if he was a businessman who paid attention to harmony and wealth, and would never make enemies with others unless it was absolutely necessary, he still had his principles and limits. Obviously, he would not give him 1,000 pieces of spiritual jade. Otherwise, if this kind of precedent was set, the Hong Chamber of Commerce would no longer need to do business in the future and wait to send spirit jade to others every day. As for revealing the identity of Lin Air, not to mention that he didn't know. Even if he did know, he would never reveal a word from his mouth. After all, the more important a customer was, the more they would pay attention to personal privacy. Privacy was the lifeline of their profession. If they broke the rules, it would ruin the reputation of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, and the consequences would be much more serious than being blackmailed for 1,000 pieces of spiritual jade. "You can't even cooperate with one?" Nan Tianyong obviously didn't expect to get such an answer. He suddenly felt embarrassed and said fiercely, "Do you know who you are talking to? Do you really think that you can bully your customers and no one can deal with you? Let me tell you, if you really make me angry, your shop will have to close tomorrow." "All right, then try it." I'll wait for the day you make the Hong Chamber of Commerce close. At this point, even with Hong Zhong's self-restraint, he no longer planned to be polite and directly responded coldly. A mere supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion actually dared to speak rudely and say that the Hong Chamber of Commerce would close. This guy was really a fucking idiot. Open the door for an idiot. Oh, you're so arrogant. To put it nicely, you're a shopkeeper, but to put it bluntly, you're just a servant doing business. How dare you bare your teeth in front of me? I'm giving you face, but you don't want it. Nan Tianyong was instantly enraged and directly smashed the table beside him into powder. However, before he could react, four figures flashed out from nowhere at a speed that was hard to see with the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, they had surrounded him. Nan Tianyong's expression changed abruptly. The aura of these four experts was actually above his. Nan Tianyong had been in seclusion for the past few years, and his strength had improved by leaps and bounds. He believed that he was definitely not an ordinary person. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to successfully sit in such an important position as the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Nan Tianyong's current strength was enough to easily crush most of the inner sect disciples of the three pavilions. Otherwise, people like Wuxia wouldn't have paid any attention to him, an in-name master. Unless it was the elders of the three pavilions or important figures like Ram Jie of the Law Enforcement Hall. He really didn't need to care about other ordinary cultivators. Otherwise, if he didn't even have this bit of confidence, how would he dare to challenge the Hong Chamber of Commerce alone? Even if he had been in seclusion in the mountains in recent years, and even if he was ignorant and inexperienced, he at least had some common sense. None of the merchants that could enter the inner street were ordinary businessmen. However, it was only at this moment that Nan Tianyong finally realized that he had really kicked an iron plate this time. Chapter 3761. One had to know that for experts of this level, the annual cost of providing for them was already a large sum of spiritual jades. In addition, there were other generous treatments. Ignoring everything else, the annual cost of the four people in front of him was already an astronomical figure. It was not something an ordinary chamber of commerce could afford. No wonder so many people said that the Hong Chamber of Commerce was unfathomable. Even his own disciple, Wuxia, deliberately reminded him not to act rashly after arriving at the Hong Chamber of Commerce and to be polite. It was already a success to be able to find out the identity of that person that day. No matter what, he should not have any conflict with the Hong Chamber of Commerce. When Wuxia said those words, Nan Tianyong only thought that his disciple was too timid to cause trouble, so he did not take it to heart. He only wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to extort a large sum of money. However, now that he thought about it, he was simply courting death. Being surrounded by four experts who were more powerful than him, and all of them looked unfriendly and murderous, Nan Tianyong instantly broke out in a cold sweat. If they were to really fight, he wouldn't even have the chance to make a move, let alone escape. The four of them only needed to move a finger, and it would be pure wishful thinking for him to leave a whole corpse. However, although he knew that the situation was not right, Nan Tianyong had always been arrogant. Even in this kind of situation, he still stubbornly refused to admit defeat. The three heroes of the Nan family would always lose in battle, but not in spirit. What? You guys are doing business. Do you dare to make a move on me, the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion? I will make it clear today, if you dare to touch a single hair of mine, then you are challenging the Soaring Sky Pavilion. I want to see if you have the guts to do so. Nan Tianyong pretended to be tough and shouted loudly. Hong Zhong and the other experts of the Hong Chamber of Commerce looked at each other, their eyes full of mockery. This guy was obviously very weak, yet he purposely pretended to be tough. He was a typical case of being tough on the outside but weak on the inside. However, Nan Tianyong's words had some effect. If he was just a wandering expert, Hong Zhong would definitely not let him walk out alive just because he dared to smash the table of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. However, the problem was that Nan Tianyong was a member of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. More importantly, he was a supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. As the saying goes, before beating a dog, one must look at its master. Hong Zhong had enough reason to kill him on the spot. However, although the Hong Chamber of Commerce had never been afraid of trouble, they would not recklessly cause trouble out of consideration for their own interests. As the leader of the three great pavilions on the North Island, Soaring Sky Pavilion was not only powerful but also had a strong background. It was linked to the interests of many strongmen in Zhongdao. It could be said to be a real behemoth. If he killed Nan Tianyong here today, although Hong Zhong would be able to vent his anger, it would also be equivalent to slapping the Soaring Sky Pavilion's face in public. After all, this guy was the supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion, not an ordinary inner disciple with no symbolic status. An ordinary inner sect disciple, even if he was from the Soaring Sky Pavilion, would not be able to escape. As long as this disciple did not have a strong background, then it could be said that it was a personal grudge. If he was killed, then so be it. The Rising Sky Pavilion would not go so far as to fall out with the equally powerful Hong Chamber of Commerce over such a small matter. However, if they killed a supervising deacon of the Soaring Sky Pavilion in public, then it would be a serious matter. In the words commonly used in the secular world, this would be a serious and nasty diplomatic incident, even if it was just for the sake of face. The higher-ups of the Soaring Sky Pavilion would definitely not turn a blind eye to it, and they would have to come forward and fight the Hong Chamber of Commerce to the death. At that time, the person who made the decision today might become the sacrifice of the mutual compromise between the higher-ups of the two forces. For Hong Zhong, who had always been good at judging the situation, it was impossible for him not to have predicted this. Therefore, even if it was just for self-protection, Hong Zhong, who was experienced and prudent, would not make such an extreme move. He immediately instructed the 4 guest chamberlains in a deep voice. This fellow came to provoke the Hong Chamber of Commerce and cause trouble. I'll have to trouble the 4 of you to throw him out, so that he won't be able to cause a ruckus here. It will affect our business. The 4 foreign chamberlains nodded immediately. Although it was much more difficult to capture each other alive than to kill each other, they not only had an absolute advantage in terms of strength, but they also had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers. If they wanted to throw Nan Tianyong out, it was just a small matter of a thought. Seeing the powerful aura of the 4 people shrouding him and about to make a move, Nan Tianyong finally panicked. Although he was sure that the other party did not dare to kill him in public, if they only threw him out without killing him, the Soaring Sky Pavilion would not interfere at all. After all, this would only make Nan Tianyong lose face, not the face of the Soaring Sky Pavilion. Being suppressed by the aura of the 4 guest experts, Nan Tianyong hurriedly admitted defeat. Don't be in a hurry to make a move. How about this? I will take a step back. I don't need you to pay 1,000 pieces of spiritual jades, as long as you tell me the identity of the person who injured my disciple. This should be reasonable, and you will not suffer a loss. Hearing this, everyone present sneered. This person was really cheap. He finally knew to admit defeat at the last moment. What was he doing earlier? Sure enough, he was a coward who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Hong Zhong laughed and looked around at the other customers who had been attracted by the commotion caused by Nan Tianyong. He suddenly felt happy in his heart. This idiot had created a good opportunity for him to advertise and build the image of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. Hong Zhong immediately said solemnly, "In our Hong Chamber of Commerce, the privacy of any guest is our lifeline. It is absolutely impossible to leak it to any other unrelated people. Therefore, this request of yours, in this old man's opinion, is extremely unreasonable. For guests, you can make your move." The 4 guest experts immediately nodded and made their move. Facing the 4 of them working together, Nan Tianyong did not even have the chance to make a sound. He was directly wrapped up by 4 layers of incomparably powerful true energy, unable to move. At the same time, the manservant on the side had already opened the window on the 2nd floor. Nan Tianyong did not even have the chance to struggle and was directly thrown out of the window like garbage. Bang! The people below suddenly exclaimed and hurriedly gave way to an empty space, allowing Nan Tianyong to fiercely fall to the ground. The fall made him dizzy. After being in a daze for a long time, Nan Tianyong dizzily struggled to get up from the ground. He stretched out his hand and touched his head. It was actually full of blood. His head was simply broken and bleeding, making him look like a mess. Chapter 3762. According to common sense, being thrown down from the 2nd floor, even an ordinary person wouldn't end up in such a miserable state, let alone a powerful cultivator like him. But the problem was, what really threw him down was not the height of the 2nd floor, but the powerful Xianxia that the 4 experts had deliberately wrapped around him. Even if they did not kill him, just the impact alone was enough to make him suffer. If it was his disciple, Wuxia, a middle-stage foundation establishment expert, then it wouldn't be as simple as falling down. He would probably die on the spot with blood flowing out of his orifices. Under the curious and gloating gazes of the passers-by, Nan Tianyong couldn't help but be flustered and exasperated. Although he didn't dare to go up to the door, he pointed at the second-floor window and was about to curse. But before he could curse, the 4 powerful auras from upstairs locked onto him. Their killing intent was faintly discernible. If he showed the slightest bit of disrespect at this time, it seemed that these 4 guest experts would kill him at any time. Although businessmen paid attention to harmony and wealth, and Nan Tianyong was very certain that Hong Zhong wouldn't kill him today, these 4 guest experts were different. Hong Zhong was a businessman, but the 4 of them weren't. They were only guests responsible for peaceful times, and the Hong Chamber of Commerce didn't have much of a restriction on them. What's more, all experts had their own pride. If a clown like Nan Tianyong repeatedly challenged their bottom line, killing him would be like killing a chicken. This was the recognized privilege of experts in the cultivation world. Even if Soaring Sky Pavilion pursued this matter, it would be useless. Facing the cold killing intent of these 4 guest experts, Nan Tianyong immediately swallowed back the vulgarities at the corner of his mouth. He was reckless, but he wasn't stupid. If he was really stupid, even if he had a powerful background, he wouldn't be able to reach this point. Hong Zhong stood at the window and saw Nan Tianyong's sullen expression. He said lightly, "Take care, I won't send you off." Although his voice wasn't loud, it was like a heavy hammer. Every word struck the chest of everyone present. Especially Nan Tianyong, who bore the brunt of it. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression was extremely ugly. However, while his expression was unsightly, Nan Tianyong was extremely shocked in his heart. This was because Hong Zhong had always been amiable. He had always thought that this old man was just a lackey of the Hong Chamber of Commerce. He didn't expect that he was in existence even more terrifying than the 4 foreign chamberlains. Just based on the strength that Hong Zhong had revealed at this moment, killing him would be as easy as crushing an ant. To think that he had recklessly provoked Hong Zhong earlier. Now that he thought about it, he broke out in cold sweat. Just now, it was as if the god of longevity wanted to hang himself. Was he tired of living? In the face of such a disparity, even if Nan Tianyong was used to being rude and overbearing, he could only bow his head and admit defeat for the time being. He covered his face and fled, causing the passers-by around him to burst into laughter. Some of them knew Hong Zhong. They all gave him a thumbs up and cheered. Hong Zhong looked at this scene and smiled slightly. He politely cupped his hands towards the people downstairs to express his gratitude. However, a few guests who were familiar with Hong Zhong found an opportunity to remind him. "Shopkeeper Hong, although this Nan Tianhai is an idiot, he has 2 other brothers who are far more powerful than him. They are also rude and unreasonable, and they have a good reputation on the North Island. Of course, their reputations are not good. You have to be careful in the future. Thank you for the reminder." Hong Zhong nodded and replied. He stroked his long beard and chuckled. "If they dare to come, just bring it on. Our Hong Chamber of Commerce is doing business. But sometimes we have to find an opportunity to show off our muscles. At least we have to intimidate some people with ulterior motives. Otherwise, if anyone dares to bare their teeth at us, it will be troublesome in the future. But there will be no end to it." Behind him was the Hong Chamber of Commerce, which was one of the top chambers of commerce in the entire 5 Heaven Stage Islands. The so-called 3 heroes of the Nan family were just local tyrants on the North Island. Not to mention the Hong Chamber of Commerce, even a newly promoted expert like Ram Jia of the Law Enforcement Hall could crush them to death with one hand. There was no need to take them seriously. If Nan Tianyong really didn't know what was good for him and went back to find his 2 brothers to stand up for him, Hong Zhong wouldn't mind suppressing the 3 heroes of the Nan family. After all, they could only do it once. He had tolerated them this time. If they came to pick a fight again, even if he killed them on the spot, the Rising Sky Pavilion wouldn't say anything. However, although Hong Zhong wasn't worried about his Hong Chamber of Commerce, he couldn't help but worry about Lin Er, whom he had just met once. Now that Nan Tianhai had suffered a setback, it was obvious that he wouldn't come to the Hong Chamber of Commerce to pick a fight in a short time. So the biggest way to vent his anger was Lin Er. Once they dug out Lin Er's identity, the consequences could be imagined. In front of the Hong Chamber of Commerce, the 3 heroes of the Nan family were just ants that could be easily crushed. However, for an expert at the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm like Lin Er, he was a big shot. If someone really came to his door, there was nothing he could do. Hopefully, this Lin Er hid well enough that he wouldn't be found so easily. Otherwise, the Spirit Jade card that he had just given out would be for naught. To others, the
The storm caused by the Hong Chamber of Commerce was just a joke. But to this so-called Lin heir, it was a huge problem, and even a matter of life and death. However, as the person involved, Lin Yi, didn't know anything about this. At present, he was just an ordinary newcomer to the Blue Cloud Pavilion. He didn't know this so-called Lin heir, nor did he have any interaction with him. However, if Lin Yi said that he was just an ordinary newcomer, then all the other newcomers from the three great pavilions would be too ashamed to show their faces. He was the first newcomer from the three great pavilions to succeed in the Foundation establishment realm, the only newcomer who could get full marks in the first two assessments, and the newcomer who could quickly recover from an attack from the peak of the early stage of the Foundation establishment realm. If this could be said to be ordinary, then the others didn't need to live anymore. Of course, if the other newcomers, who were already exhausted from cultivating 3 or 4 spirit herb seeds every day, knew that Lin Yi could easily cultivate 85 spirit herb seeds at the same time, then they would probably all commit suicide together. Chapter 3763. However, for the rookies, the real challenge had only just begun. That was because the 4th rookie assessment segment was about to begin. And the content of this assessment segment was similar to the rookie assessment in previous years. It was the rookie challenge that everyone was familiar with. However, compared to the previous year's challenge, which was purely a head-on ranking, this rookie challenge segment was not only a competition between the 3 pavilions. In order to be integrated with the other assessment segments, it highlighted a point system. In this rookie challenge segment, every rookie's existing cave abode would be used as the initial ranking. The cave abode and corresponding points would be used as the spoils of war for each round of the challenge. The winner would be rewarded in real time. Naturally, the loser would also receive the corresponding punishment in real time. Taking the Blue Cloud Pavilion as an example, there were a total of 15 cave abodes at the foot of the mountain. They were divided into number 1 at the foot of the mountain to number 15 at the foot of the mountain. Each cave abode had a corresponding challenge point. Number 1 at the foot of the mountain was worth 15 points. Number 2 at the foot of the mountain was worth 14 points. Number 3 at the foot of the mountain was worth 13 points, and so on. The last cave abode, number 10 at the foot of the mountain, was worth 1 point. Every time, be it taking the initiative to issue a challenge or accepting a challenge, the rookie would have to use the challenge points corresponding to his cave abode as a bet. If the challenger won, he would obtain the challenger's challenge points and obtain the challenger's cave abode. If he lost, he would lose his challenge points and the cave abode would remain unchanged. Of course, only the cave abode with a lower ranking had the right to take the initiative to challenge a cave abode with a higher ranking. Furthermore, the other party could not refuse the challenge. If it was a cave abode with a higher ranking, one could not take the initiative to challenge a cave abode with a lower ranking. For example, Lin Yi was in number 14 cave abode at the foot of the mountain. So he could only challenge the rookies in the first 13 caves, but he could not take the initiative to challenge Meng Tong, who lived in number 15 cave abode at the foot of the mountain. And if he took the initiative to issue a challenge to the rookies in the first 13 caves, for example, Li Zhengming in number 2 cave abode at the foot of the mountain, then, in the challenge between the two, the challenge points that Lin Yi needed to take out would be the 2 points corresponding to his cave abode at the foot of the mountain. As for Li Zhengming, due to his cave abode ranking being higher than Lin Yi, he could not refuse. Therefore, not only could he not refuse, but he also had to take out the 14 challenge points corresponding to the second cave abode at the foot of the mountain. If Lin Yi won, then he would get 14 challenge points from his opponent, and he would also get his opponent's second cave house at the foot of the mountain. On the other hand, not only would Li Zhengming lose 14 challenge points, he would also have to live in the 14th cave house at the foot of the mountain until the next time he challenged someone. On the contrary, if Li Zhengming wins, then he will get 2 challenge points from the opponent, and continue to live in the second cave under the mountain without changing, while Lin Yi will have 2 challenge points deducted, and continue to struggle in the 14th cave under the mountain. Apart from that, the most important thing was, in the 4th segment, every rookie's challenge points were given according to the different cave abodes. Every rookie would be given corresponding challenge points in the first round of the challenge competition. The rest of the points used were from the previous assessment segment. In other words, Lin Yi's initial points before the start of the challenge would be the 2 points corresponding to the 14th cave abode at the foot of the mountain, in addition to the 105 points he had obtained in the previous 2 rounds of assessment. Added together, it would be 107 points. Whether his points would increase or decrease would depend entirely on his performance in the upcoming Challenge League. However, not every rookie was as rich as Lin Yi.
It had to be known that most of the rookie in the Blue Cloud Pavilion only had a total of 10 to 20 points in the previous 2 rounds. Even the initial points given in the challenge competition segment did not exceed 30 points. Using these points as the gambling capital. If they were not strong enough, or if they did not choose the right opponent, they might lose all these points after a few rounds of the challenge competition. In this way, no matter how low the ranking of the cave abode they were in, they would lose the right to take the initiative to challenge. And if someone came to challenge them, if they still lost, then the other party could normally obtain challenge points in cave abodes, but their points could only be deducted to negative points. Any rookie, once they were reduced to such a point, would basically say goodbye to the 3 great pavilions. This was because this was simply a stain that could not be erased. Even if they could successfully reach the foundation establishment stage in the future, the 3 great pavilions would definitely not accept such a rookie. After all, it was embarrassing to say it out loud. Apart from that, the challenge competition segment was the same as the elixir trial segment. It was a protracted battle that would last for a full 2 months. On every day ending with 3, 6 or 9, every rookie had a chance to issue a challenge and accept a challenge. And if more than one person issued a challenge to the same person, the person who issued the challenge first would obtain the right to challenge, and the challenged party would not be able to refuse. As for the other challengers, their challenge would be deemed invalid, and they could challenge other people. In this way, in the next 2 months, there would be a total of 18 rounds of challenge competition. Although not everyone would participate in every round of the challenge, the assessment points were not only directly related to the final reward for the rookies, but more importantly, it directly affected the evaluation of them by the 3 pavilions. It was related to their future, so it was not an exaggeration to say that the assessment points were their lifeblood. In such an environment, as long as there was a chance to obtain points, no rookie would easily let it go. And the challenge competition segment was the best way to make the competition as intense as possible. Unless they had completely given up hope, the rookies who were lagging behind would definitely not let go of any opportunity to challenge. When that time came, the difficulty of the challenge competition could be imagined. Don't forget, this was not just 1 or 2 rounds. It would last for a full 2 months. Furthermore, other than the challenge competition, they also had to nurture the elixir seeds. Otherwise, even if they did well in the challenge competition, their points would ultimately be dragged down by the withered elixir seeds. When that happened, their points would be deducted instead, and all their hard work would be for naught. Therefore, between the challenge competition and the elixir seeds, everyone had to make a balance. The difference was just more inclined towards the challenge competition, or more inclined towards the elixir seeds. After all, they were not Lin Yi. Everyone had a limited amount of vital energy. Once it was used up, they would need to spend a long time to recover.